had done nothing more than the most basic quick-draw slash. Yet it left even the woman known as the Sword Saint stunned. On the surface, it looked like Ronin had only swung once. But in truth, he had struck 3 times. And he had even slowed the final strike to a crawl, as if he were afraid the professors at the Empire's premier academy wouldn't be able to see it. That arrogant move sent the Sword Saint into a fury, and she demanded to know who had taught him that swordsmanship. But Ronin had never received any formal training. Everything he knew had been forged through hundreds of battles in his previous life. And the reason Ronin had managed to return to this point in time was a woman's kiss. It all began when 3 unbelievably powerful 4-winged giants suddenly descended upon the world. They rampaged across the Empire without restraint. In just 1 week, they destroyed more than half the Empire's territory. To stop the giants, the entire punitive core unit Ronin served in was wiped out. And after Ronin pushed himself to the limit and killed the last giant, his own life finally reached its end. Ronin stood alone, staring at the horrific scene before him, his heart hollow with despair. Then, all of a sudden, a strange voice rang out. "It is I, Ahayut. What oversight. I never expected to find a human as powerful as you here." Ronin whipped around in shock, only to realize the voice was coming from the giant that was supposed to be dead. Furious, Ronin stomped on its face. "You turned half the Empire into a wasteland of graves. How are you still not dead?" Then Ronin curled his lips into a mocking smile. "Do you know how the other 2 giants died? One was burned to ashes by the Crimson Dragon's flames. The other was sealed away forever by a mage." Ronin thought those words would finally provoke the giant, but it showed no surprise at all. Powerful human, do not use shallow words to describe the truth. The children of the stars share their senses. I know how they died. I also know that the ones who fought them were all annihilated. There is no one left on this land as strong as you. So the world you fought to protect will ultimately be drowned in starlight. Before it could finish speaking, Ronin cut off its head with a single slash. After that, Ronin began to wander aimlessly, wanting to look at this world a little longer before his final moments came. Just as he was sinking into grief, he thought he heard a faint cry for help. So Ronin dragged his heavily wounded body toward the sound. But the person he found left him utterly stunned. To his surprise, General Adeshan was still alive, and that gave Ronin the first small trace of comfort he had felt. The moment she saw Ronin, the general hurriedly asked whether they had won the war. And when she learned that Ronin had slain the last giant, relief washed over her. "Thank you, Private First Class Ronin." Truly. Hearing that, Ronin took the chance to make one request. "If you're really that grateful, could you make sure my comrades are buried properly?" The bodies of punitive core soldiers were always discarded in the past, but this time they fought bravely. "I think they deserve an honorable burial." At that, the general admitted that she was barely hanging on herself, so it would be better for Ronin to handle that matter personally. The moment she finished speaking, Ronin broke into a violent coughing fit. "You may be overestimating me a little. In my condition, I'm basically hanging on second by second. It's a shame. There are still too many things I never got to do." Hearing that, the general asked him what he would want to do if he could somehow survive. At that question, a faint spark lit up in Ronin's eyes. "I'd probably go study at the academy. That was the wish my late sister left behind. But it looks like that won't happen. My family's about to be together again." The instant those words left his mouth, the sky suddenly cleared. A few rays of dawn broke through the clouds. But instead of relief, both of them widened their eyes in horror. Because there, hanging in the sky, was an 8-winged giant. The 4-winged giants they had fought to the death to kill had not been the limit of those monsters after all. The true peak was 8 wings. And with that 8-winged giant came countless 4-winged followers descending behind it. At that moment, the general's eyes filled with despair. This was already the 3rd time she had faced giants, and she had never imagined the end waiting for them would be this hopeless. But beside her, Ronin drew his sword with unwavering resolve and told the general to cast levitation magic and send him up for one final fight to the death. The general froze. She had never expected that even in the face of absolute despair, Ronin would still have no intention of backing down. Then, as if she had suddenly remembered something, she shot to her feet, kissed Ronin, and pushed a bead into his mouth. This is a bead that can turn back time 4 times. I've already used it 3. It's the secret that let a little seamstress like me rise to the rank of general. I'm leaving the last chance to you. I believe you're the key to stopping the end of the world. And if you ever meet me again, please convince me to live honestly as a tailor. When Ronin opened his eyes again, he found himself back in the hometown of his youth. Looking at the familiar scenery around him, he could barely process what had happened. So the general had been telling the truth. There were still 10 years left before the giants descended. But could he really pull this off all by himself? Then something hit him. If all of this was real, didn't that mean he could see his sister again? At once, he grabbed a tree branch, and ran toward home. On the way, a gang of local thugs caught his attention. But when he looked closer, Ronin was stunned. The child being bullied wasn't hanging from a rope at all. Someone was using magic to suspend him in midair. Ronin could hardly believe it. Even on the battlefield, someone with that kind of skill would count as rare high-level talent. Yet in a tiny backwater village like this, someone could use such an uncommon spell. The blonde punk at the front was demanding to know whether the boy had any money left, and the boy said every last coin had gone toward medicine for his mother. Hearing that, the blonde thug flew into a rage. He immediately ordered the boy who was using magic to hoist the child back up into the air. But kind-hearted Asher clearly didn't want to do it. Before Asher could even release the spell, Ronin cracked him on the head with the branch. "If you don't stop now, that kid's going to die." The moment he heard that, Asher hurriedly lowered the boy back down. But the burly blonde thug wasn't having it. So he tells you to stop. And you stop? "You little punk, are you saying I don't matter?" Ronin, however, grabbed Asher and pulled him over. "Forget this trash for now. Tell me, where did you learn your telekinesis magic?" Asher timidly explained that he had taught himself from a spellbook he bought from a traveling merchant. That left Ronin stunned. To think someone could reach this level using nothing but a cheap spellbook. His instincts told him that Asher would definitely play a role in fighting the giants one day. Just then, the furious blonde thug drew his sword. Gripping it tightly, he swung it straight at Ronin. Ronin saw through his weakness instantly. The strike had power, but the form behind it was an absolute mess. Ronin simply shifted to the side with calm precision and avoided it with ease. Seeing that, the blonde thug started to panic a little, but he still convinced himself it was just luck. "Looks like you got lucky and dodged that one. Get on your knees and beg, and I'll only take one of your arms. I might even let you live. I'll make sure to take real good care of that pretty sister of yours. Every time I see her, I can barely hold myself back." Before he could even finish, one of his ears went flying. Ronin had not been this furious in a very long time. His sister was the one line no one was allowed to cross, and he would never let anyone defile her. The scene scared the surrounding lackeys half to death. He had used nothing but a tree branch, yet it carried the force of a true sword strike. Realizing they were completely outmatched, they handed all the money on them over to the boy. Then they ran off with their tails between their legs. After that, Ronin unilaterally set a meeting with Asher for 3 days later at the same place. He also made it clear that if Asher didn't show up, he would personally come looking for him. It wasn't long before Ronin finally returned home, but when he reached the door, he stopped and could not bring himself to go inside. He didn't know how to face his sister, and he didn't know what he was supposed to say. Because in his previous life, Ronin had left home without a word and never even got to see her one last time. When Ronin finally stood before his sister again, he said only one thing: "I'm home." Then he handed her the flowers she loved most. His sister was overwhelmed with joy. She never would have imagined that, in this lifetime, she would one day receive flowers from her little brother. That stubborn, prideful kid from back then had actually come this far. In her excitement, she immediately asked Ronin if he wanted her to make a few more dishes. Ronin took one look at the absurd spread in front of him, 18 dishes and a soup, and hurriedly waved both hands in refusal. After the meal, Ronin finally told his sister that he wanted to attend the academy. The moment she heard that, she lit up with joy and asked him again and again whether he was truly serious. Because sending Ronin to the academy had been her dream for a very long time. Once she got his confirmation, she skipped all the way to a corner of the house. After rummaging around for quite a while, she dragged out a huge jar, and it was filled to the brim with gold coins. Ronin was stunned and quickly asked where all that money had come from. Puffing up with pride, his sister put her hands on her hips. "I saved it all to surprise you, so that the moment you decided to go to the academy, you'd be able to leave right away." Ronin could only smile awkwardly and admit that it still wasn't nearly enough, telling her to keep the money for herself. Because the academy he wanted to enter was the Empire's most prestigious school of all, the Royal Philion Academy. It had the finest professors on the entire continent, backed by the massive financial support of the royal family, which meant Philion also had the harshest admission standards and tuition so high it was practically outrageous. On top of that, it was the Academy General Adeshan had personally told him to attend. 3 days later, Ronin arrived at the place where he had arranged to meet Asher. The moment they met, Ronin got straight to the point and said he wanted to run a few tests on him that night. More specifically, he wanted Asher to use his telekinesis on him at full force so he could find out exactly where Asher's limit was. Asher immediately grew nervous and hesitated to make a move. But under Ronin's pressure, he eventually had no choice but to cast his telekinesis magic on him. After experiencing it for himself, Ronin was genuinely surprised. This guy was even more impressive than he had expected. The stability and height control were still lacking, but the sensation was already very close to what it had been during the final battle. Back then, it had taken several mages lifting him to the same height as the giants for him to truly cut loose. Ronan could not help but feel excited. Mages were already rare enough, but someone born with telekinesis talent was even rarer. He really had landed an unbelievably strong start. Meanwhile, Asher was already close to collapsing, and his hands would not stop shaking. Seeing that, Ronan told him to hold on just a little longer. There was still one last thing he needed to confirm. As he spoke, Ronan drew his sword and slashed straight at the telekinetic force. To Asher's shock, Ronan actually severed his magic in half. Asher stared in utter disbelief. He had never even heard of magic being cut apart before. Ronan offered no explanation and simply told him to think of it as one of his secret techniques. The truth was, even Ronan himself did not fully understand it. His sword could not only cut through magic, but also wound Yahello, the giant that even the Sword Saint had failed to injure. Unraveling the mystery behind that power was also one of the main goals of his reborn life. But that could wait. Right now, something more important came first. Ronan then tossed his bag to Asher. Move. We got something we need to finish before sunrise. It's the condition we need to reach Philion. Asher stood there in shock. Wait, did I hear that right? Ronan, are we really talking about Philion Academy? The one where all the Empire's elite gather? Ronan looked puzzled. What? You don't want to go? That's not the issue at all. Ronan, you've got incredible swordsmanship, so of course getting in won't be a problem for you. But me? I've got nothing. Ronan did not comfort him. Instead, he answered in a stern voice. Do you really want to keep living like this and waste your whole life away? Are you really willing to throw away talent like yours just to keep groveling before a bunch of street trash? A real man changes once he realizes what he's lacking. Coming to Philion with me is the perfect first step. Otherwise, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. Those words moved Asher deeply. This was the first time anyone had ever cared about his future like this, and he quickly agreed. Seeing that, Ronan broke into a sly grin. Everything was going exactly the way he wanted. Not long after, Ronan led Asher to a camp. Inside, dozens of goblins were fast asleep. They were a variant species of goblin known as Luna goblins. They were obsessed with gold and treasure, so they often raided merchant groups and wealthy caravans to steal valuables. Every full moon, they would gather all their loot together and hold a celebration. And Ronan's target tonight was the stash of treasure they had piled up. All you need to do is use your telekinesis to move their treasure into the bag little by little. Sounds easy, right? Asher was instantly terrified. If they wake up in the middle of it, we're dead. Why don't we go back first and come up with another plan? Hearing that, Ronan snapped in irritation. When are you ever going to grow out of that cowardly streak? If we want to get into Philion, we need two things. First, money. Second, real combat experience. And this job gives us both at once. After a long round of Ronan drilling it into him, Asher finally began using his magic with trembling caution. Before long, he had transferred every last bit of the Luna Goblin's horde. And just like that, the problem of tuition for both of them was basically solved. Watching Asher practically buzzing with excitement beside him, Ronan did not hold back his praise. Even he had not expected Asher to adapt to real combat this quickly. He had really lucked into a gem. But just as the two of them finished packing up and were getting ready to leave, a thunderous shout suddenly rang out from not too far away. Ronan instantly felt trouble coming. His luck was as terrible as ever. Sure enough, every sleeping goblin in the camp was jolted awake by the noise. The first thing they did after opening their eyes was look toward the treasure chests. Before Ronan and Asher could get very far, a whole mob of goblins had already spotted them. Enraged, the goblins grabbed their weapons and charged straight at them. Asher collapsed to the ground in terror. What do we do, Ronan? Shouldn't we just drop the treasure and run? Ronan rejected the idea outright. Instead, he lowered his gaze and carefully examined the sword he had taken from the blonde thug. Judging by the weight and durability of the blade, he figured it could handle about 15 swings. Then he looked up and estimated the number of goblins. Around 30. After making that calculation, Ronan curled his lips into a faint grin. 15 is enough. In the next instant, he drew his sword and stepped forward. With a single swing, he unleashed 3 separate slashes. Then he shot into the goblin pack like a bolt of lightning, and within only a few breaths, all 30 goblins had been cut down. The entire scene left Asher in utter shock, so stunned he could not even react. Ronan, on the other hand, merely loosened up his body a little, quietly thinking to himself that his current body was still far too weak. Once he got back, he would have to train it properly. Just then, an arrow came screaming in from behind Asher. Luckily, Ronan's reflexes were fast enough for him to snatch it out of the air in time. A moment later, 2 figures emerged from a distance. They claimed they had mistaken Ronan and Asher for prey, but there was not even a trace of apology on their faces. Their eyes were fixed greedily on the bags behind them. Ronan did not bother hiding his contempt. You two are terrible actors. So who exactly are you? Realizing their little act had been seen through, The two men looked awkward for a moment. Then one of them stepped forward with a grin and started introducing himself. But the moment he got close enough, he suddenly pulled out a dagger and slashed at Ronin. "We're Karibru. You picked the wrong people to mess with, brat." But Ronin neutralized the attack with ease. The moment he remembered what kind of group Karibru was, anger flashed across his face. "So you're those pieces of trash." Sensing things had gone bad, the other man also lunged at Ronin, but he completely ignored Asher at his side, and in the next second Asher locked him in place with telekinesis. Seeing that, Ronin felt genuinely pleased. No wonder he had taken a liking to him. Then Ronin snatched the dagger straight out of the first man's hand, and in an instant unleashed dozens of slashes onto him. Before the man could get another word out, his body had already been shredded into countless chunks of flesh. Watching that, Asher felt a chill run through him. Did it really have to go that far? Ronin, however, did not care in the slightest. "They came here planning to kill me. Why would I spare them? And more importantly, they're from the infamous Karibru. That poaching gang burns, kills, steals, and takes whatever they want. Letting scum like that walk away would be the real crime." Right then, the bags the two thieves had been carrying suddenly started shaking violently. Curious, Ronin untied the rope. In the next instant, a bird-like creature shot straight out. Looking closely, it turned out to be a blue bird with striking intelligence in its eyes. Asher was instantly captivated by how adorable it was. Then Ronin noticed the chain around its leg. It was the kind of shackle Karibru used to capture fantasy species, a restraint capable of sealing the target's magic. While the two were still wondering about it, a voice suddenly came from the blue bird. Asher jumped in fright. "That bird can talk?" Ronin looked annoyed instead. "That's obviously long-range communication magic. The one talking has to be its owner." "Hello, my name is Baron. I research fantasy species in the Imperial capital, and I'm also this Dreambird's guardian. It suddenly disappeared last night, and I haven't been able to reach it no matter what I tried. I know this is abrupt, but may I ask who you are?" Hearing that, Ronin briefly explained what had happened, and after finishing, he casually cut through the shackles on the Dreambird's leg with one slash. That act moved the Dreambird to no end. It immediately flew up in front of Ronin and started wiggling its rear like crazy. Fortunately, Baron quickly explained, it wants you to pluck one of its feathers before it leaves. Dreambird feathers have a special trait. They point toward the bird's main body like a compass. Looks like Ophi really likes you. Once you make it to the Imperial capital, you can use that to find me. It'll give me a chance to repay you properly. The moment he finished speaking, Ophi shot off toward the Imperial capital like an arrow released from a bow. The speed of it left even Ronin staring in disbelief. It was only when Asher pointed it out that Ronin realized Ophi had left something behind in his hand. Early the next morning, Ronin and Asher took the spoils from the night before and headed to the marketplace. After examining the item for quite a while, a merchant priced the necklace in his hand at 20 gold coins. Only then did Ronin finally show a satisfied smile. Compared to this merchant group, the ones he had dealt with before had practically been scammers. After selling off all the treasure, the two of them finally managed to gather enough money for Filian's absurdly expensive tuition. Then Ronin took out an egg-shaped object and asked the merchant to identify it for him. It was the thing the Dreambird had left behind before flying off. At first, Ronin had actually thought the bird had dumped a lump of droppings into his hand. He had immediately hurled it away in disgust. But to his surprise, the thing was completely undamaged, while the boulder it hit shattered into pieces. Even so, after studying it for quite a long time, the well-traveled merchant could only scratch his head awkwardly and admit that he had no idea what it was. Ronin let out a helpless sigh. Looks like he would have to wait until he got to the Imperial capital and ask Baron in person. After that, Ronin asked the merchant whether he had any books about Filion Academy. The merchant's eyes lit up at once. "Funny enough, my daughter's going to take the entrance exam for Filion too." With that, he turned toward the market entrance and called out for his daughter. Before long, Maria appeared in front of the two of them, wearing a puzzled expression. But the moment Ronin heard that name, his whole body stiffened. He quickly walked over to her. "You really are Maria? The one whose middle name is Sane?" Maria blinked in confusion, then nodded and asked how Ronin knew that. Ronin did not answer. Instead, he fell into deep thought. Because the Maria he remembered had clearly been someone with the bearing of a sharp, valiant man. With that thought in mind, Ronin instinctively leaned close to Maria's ear and whispered, Are you actually a man?" Maria froze on the spot. Then she looked down at her own body, one that clearly looked nothing like a man's, and started wondering whether Ronin had bad eyesight or something wrong with his head. Just as Ronin was still lost in thought, an attack suddenly came flying at him. Furious, Maria swung her hand and smacked Ronin across the face with a loud slap. But instead of getting angry, Ronin found that the powerful hit gave him a strange sense of familiarity. At that moment, Ronin became 100% certain that this fiery-tempered woman in front of him really was the Maria he knew. She had once been the supply officer when Ronin served as a punitive corps soldier in Elrain. Because she was decisive and straightforward, people genuinely liked her, and she had left a strong impression on Ronin. But Maria had always had one strange quirk. Whenever the men started making crude guy jokes around her, she would explode on the spot and slap every last one of them. That question had bothered Ronin for a long time. He had always thought that if they ever met again, he would definitely ask Maria why she acted that way. But regrettably, in his previous life, Maria had died before he did. Ronin never imagined that the answer to a mystery that had haunted him for years would turn out to be this, and he could not help almost laughing. That little laugh, however, completely set Maria off. Looks like that lesson still wasn't enough for you, Brad. With that, she charged at Ronin again. This time, Ronin gave her no opening at all and slammed a fist straight on her head. You've seriously gone too far. I'll let you hit me once, and now you're pushing your luck? But instead of calming down, Maria only got even angrier the more she thought about it. She suddenly drove her head forward in a vicious head but aimed at Ronin's chin and shouted, "Yeah, I hit you. What are you gonna do about it?" At that, Ronin stopped holding back, and the two of them immediately started brawling for real. The sudden turn of events left the other two staring in total disbelief. Once they snapped out of it, they rushed over in a panic. "Stop. Both of you, stop fighting." After a great deal of effort, they finally managed to separate them. Asher stared at the scene in front of him, completely dumbfounded. Just moments ago, those two had looked ready to kill each other, and now they were sitting together calmly discussing business. Ronin then pulled out 3 swords and a staff, asking Maria to check their quality. Maria looked puzzled. "Do you really need to carry 3 swords by yourself?" Ronin explained that he kept extras as backups, since he tended to go pretty hard on his swords in battle. After a brief pause, Maria pointed at one of the black blades and said, "All 3 of these are decent, but this black iron sword is especially good. Plenty of famous knights have been looking for weapons like this." Then she turned toward Asher. "And the reason Ronin kept this staff must be because you're a rare mage, right? What kind of magic do you use?" Hearing that, Asher looked visibly delighted. He shyly admitted that he only knew telekinesis magic. Maria's reaction was immediate and intense. Telekinesis magic? If you perform well enough, you might even qualify for a scholarship. Asher's basically a sure thing. But what about you, Ronin? What are you planning to show during the skills exam? Ronin blinked. "Show what?" Maria patiently explained that if he wanted to get into Philion, he would have to pass both the written test and the practical skills exam. The skills exam basically meant demonstrating his abilities in front of the professors. Nobles usually showed off secret family techniques, while most martial applicants displayed their own magic application methods or combat arts. Ronin frowned in confusion. If someone isn't a mage, how are they using magic power at this age? Maria's eyes widened in shock. Using the magic power we all know and control in actual combat. Isn't it the most basic combat method there is? Don't tell me you don't even know what magic sensing is. Ronin looked completely lost. Sensing magic? Isn't that basically the same as aura? That sentence made Maria completely lose it. She felt like she was trying to explain calculus to a 3-year-old. After thinking it over, Maria picked up Ronin's 2 short swords and decided to put him through special training herself. Ronin sounded deeply unwilling. Those were the only 3 swords he had, and if they got damaged, it would pain him to no end. So Maria had no choice but to promise that if she broke them, she would pay him back triple. But before that, she needed to properly explain the basics to him. As everyone knew, magic power was the root force behind all things. Like air, it existed everywhere in the world as a natural form of energy. But not everyone could use it. To manipulate magic power, one first had to be able to see and sense one's own power, which was what people called magic sensing. The amount of time it took to reach that stage varied, depending on a person's training method, talent, and other factors. But under normal circumstances, most people could sense magic after around 1 year of practice. Anyone hoping to enter Philion had to go beyond that stage and become capable of skillfully using a personal method of magic application before they could even hope to knock on Philion's door. But Ronin, forget sensing magic. You can't even tell the difference between magic power and aura. Someone like you getting into Philion? That's pure fantasy. From one angle, sure, aura can technically be seen as a form of magic power, but the gap between the two is world apart. Even geniuses acknowledged for their talent need at least 10 years of brutal effort before they can master aura. After hearing Maria's detailed explanation, Ronin finally began to understand. Back on the battlefield, he had encountered opponents like that before. People who called themselves aura users. He had no idea they were such extraordinary figures. They had definitely been troublesome to deal with, but in the end, they had all fallen beneath his sword. Before Ronin could keep mulling it over, Maria cut in. "That's enough theory. Let's move on to the practical part." Before the words had even finished leaving her mouth, Maria activated her magic-based combat technique and burst straight toward Ronan. Even Ronan felt his heart tighten a little at that kind of speed. But even so, her sudden strike was still received with ease. Then, with nothing more than a casual swing of his blade, Ronan forced her back. Maria froze. She had intended to end the fight in a single move, because she simply did not believe a brat who did not even understand magic could ever make it in a Philion. In her mind, it was better for Ronan to face reality here than embarrass himself during the exam. But instead, she was the one being completely overwhelmed by Ronan, who could not even use magic at all. While Maria was still distracted, Ronan struck again and blasted her back over 2 meters. You're actually pretty strong. Setting magic aside, you've got real talent with a sword. If you improve how you control your center of gravity, you'll get a lot better. With that, Ronan turned to leave, reminding Maria not to forget her promise. Feeling utterly looked down on, Maria flew into a rage. You seriously think this means you won? But before she could continue talking tough, the short sword in her hand shattered into countless fragments. Watching Ronan's figure grow more distant, Maria stood there completely frozen. Who exactly was this guy? By the next day, Ronan had not only received enough money to buy 3 new swords, but also a set of past written exam questions and key study notes Maria had prepared for the 2 of them. It turned out Maria had originally wanted to tutor both him and Asura herself. But the merchant caravan had to leave for another town on business, so she had no choice but to say goodbye early. In the days that followed, Ronan spent every daytime studying for the written exam, and every night hunting magical beasts to improve his stamina and get his body back into fighting shape. Before long, a full month had passed in the blink of an eye. Ronan and Asura finally arrived at the Philion Academy they had been longing for. Looking at the palace-like grandeur of the building before them, Asura was completely stunned and could not stop letting out amazed reactions. Ronan, on the other hand, stood there deep in thought. At this point in time, that person should also be a Philion. Maybe he would see him during the exam. Just then, Asura suddenly leaned in and asked whether Ronan had brought the Dreambird's feather. Ronan had originally planned to look for Baron only after the exam was over. But the moment he took the feather out, it started shaking violently, and the direction it pointed to happen to be the very building standing in front of them. At the same time, Baron was just about to open the window for some fresh air when a face suddenly popped into view right in front of him. The unexpected sight scared both man and bird half to death. Trembling all over, Baron immediately pulled the dream bird into his arms. Who are you? Don't tell me you're more of those bastards after Ophi. It was only when Ronan raised the feather high into the air that Baron suddenly realized who they were. So you're our benefactors. Ronan was surprised too. He had never expected the Dreambird's owner to be a rare lion beast man, and a fairly well-known professor at Philion, no less. After a brief exchange, Baron learned that Ronan and Asura were both applicants for admission. He let out a sigh. If I'd known earlier that you 2 were candidates, I could have written you a recommendation letter. Still, you don't need to worry too much. Even if you don't make it in, I have ways to help you. Before he could finish, Ronan cut him off, clearly not interested in hearing something that ominous. Then he handed over the egg the dream bird had left behind, explaining that Ophi had dropped it off before leaving. When he saw Baron's expression grow more and more emotional after taking the egg, Ronan could not help feeling puzzled. It was just a bird laying an egg. Was that really worth this much shock? Baron answered with unusual seriousness. Of course it is. This is a dreambird's egg. I can't even begin to predict what kind of little creature might hatch from it. Ronan rolled his eyes. What else is supposed to hatch from a bird egg except a bird? Baron shook his head. Dreambird eggs are far more complicated than that. A dream bird absorbs the inherent magic in its surroundings, or from the beings it comes into contact with, before laying an egg. For example, if an egg is formed in a region of lava, it might hatch into a firebird whose whole body is wreathed in flames. And if a dream bird is born near a monster nest, what hatches may even take on the traits of a magical beast. So sometimes, what comes out of the egg may have almost nothing to do with birds at all. Of course, you can also try to infer its future form from the magic leaking out of the egg. But Ophi's egg is different. It contains countless kinds of magic all mixed together, boiling and churning like molten iron in a furnace. At this point, I can't tell you with any certainty what this egg will hatch into. Ronan was genuinely stunned after hearing that. He had never imagined such a tiny egg could involve that much mystery. No wonder fantasy species were the stuff of legend. After thinking it over for a moment, Baron awkwardly spoke up again, this time wanting to entrust the egg to Ronan. Ronan looked surprised. But shouldn't something like this be incredibly valuable? Baron did not deny it. It is extremely valuable. A dream bird can only lay 1 egg in its entire lifetime. But if Ophi chose to leave something this precious with you, then maybe it sensed something. Ophi has been with me through many long years. I want to respect my friend's choice, so I hope you'll keep it safe." Ronan agreed on the spot. He was curious too about what the egg would eventually hatch into. Just as Ronan was about to get up and leave, Baron stopped him. "I've been wondering how to repay you both. Since the egg is going with you, I just so happen to have something else that suits your situation perfectly." With that, Baron took out a scroll that recorded the location of a place that might be helpful to the egg. After parting ways with Baron, Ronan headed to the practical exam grounds for the martial program. Sitting before him were the 5 professors responsible for this year's evaluation. The old man in the center was Filian's headmaster, the Grand Mage Kratatet, and the woman seated beside him was the swordsmanship instructor and former sword saint, Nybyarger. The pressure Ronan felt from just those two sitting there was already considerable. After steadying himself a little, Ronan bowed respectfully to the professors present. After a brief exchange, they announced the details of the test. The magical combat training doll in front of you will be your opponent today. All you need to do is demonstrate your technique against it once. Hearing that, Ronan drew his sword and said calmly, "There's nothing especially fancy about what I'm going to show. It's just a quick slash." The moment he said that, 2 of the professors burst into open laughter. Every year, there were always applicants like this, people who took one look at the magical combat doll and said something so ridiculous it was almost funny. After all, the doll's defense was strong enough to withstand aura, and it also possessed rapid self-repair. It was an extremely precise product of magical engineering. Even Shuri Pan, the one hailed as the greatest swordsmanship prodigy, had only barely managed to leave a sword mark on it. The headmaster was surprised as well, but what worried him more was whether Ronan would lose his nerve after being mocked by the professors. But the very next moment, the headmaster's pupils shrank sharply. How could a child this young possess such presence? In the distance, Ronan had already taken his stance. Then, with the slightest push from his foot, he swung his sword at the doll at blinding speed. In a single instant, the slash was complete. Then Ronan gave the professor's platform a small bow. "My demonstration is finished." The moment he said that, the 2 professors started mocking him again. Unbelievable. He really did just show one ordinary slash. That makes him pretty hard to score. As he spoke, the blonde professor turned to the headmaster beside him, wanting to hear his opinion, only to find that the headmaster was already staring in complete shock. Meanwhile, Nybyarger stepped onto the professor's platform with one foot, and in the next instant shot straight toward Ronan. Right before everyone's stunned eyes, she placed her blade against his neck. "Tell me, who taught you that swordsmanship?" Nybyarger's chest rose and fell violently, and her voice was thick with rage she could barely hold down. Ronan looked completely baffled by her reaction. "What do you mean, who taught me? I have no idea what you're talking about." So Nybyarger changed the question. "Did you see what I just did?" Ronan answered honestly. "I did. Your swordsmanship is incredible. In less time than it takes to even finish drawing once, you struck 3 times. Hearing that, Nybyarger's mood eased a little. "Exactly. Just like what you showed a moment ago." But then her tone suddenly changed. "But you arrogant little. You even deliberately slowed down the last horizontal slash. Were you afraid we wouldn't catch your pathetic little trick? What do you think this place is?" Ronan felt a little awkward because the reason he had slowed down the last strike was not to look down on the professors. It was because he was worried the sword would not survive the blow. So he had deliberately reduced the force a little. After all, it was the very last sword he had left. But looking at the furious Nybyarger in front of him, Ronan chose not to explain. Even to him, that excuse sounded a little far-fetched. Faced with that situation, the headmaster did not know what to say either and could only awkwardly look away. As for the 2 professors who had been mocking him so openly, both lowered their heads, because the truth was that they had not seen a thing. After a brief silence, Nybyarger withdrew her sword and slowly walked back to the professor's platform. Just when Ronan thought it was finally over, Nybyarger suddenly turned back and glared at him. "I will personally teach you." Watching her return to her seat in a fit of anger, the headmaster was stunned. What she had just said sounded exactly like she had already decided to take the boy in as her disciple. "Looks like I'll have to take this seriously too. Good work, Ronan. But we still have one final share question. There's no right answer to it. So just answer however you truly feel. What is the one thing you most want to learn at Filion?" Ronan froze for a full 2.5 seconds. Fragments of the past kept flashing through his mind. Then, with unwavering eyes, he answered, "I think, I want to learn how not to live with regret." After Ronan left, the headmaster suddenly burst out laughing. "That's a hard question. I don't even know how I'd teach that." Meanwhile, the blonde professor hurried over and asked what in the world had just happened. The headmaster did not answer. He simply lifted his gaze toward the magical combat doll ahead of them. Everyone followed his line of sight, only to see a crack slowly appear across the doll Ronan had struck. Then, with a deafening boom, the doll split cleanly in half. The 2 professors were completely dumbfounded. This was the first time the magical combat doll had ever suffered damage on that level. On the other side, Ronan, who had already left the testing grounds, was still replaying everything that had just happened. Naibairager's presence and swordsmanship had left a deep impression on him. Even before his return, he would not have been confident in defeating her. He had once believed he was already battle-hardened, but now he realized he still had a very long way to go. Thinking of that, Ronan smiled faintly. It seemed the general had been right to send him to Philion. He was certain he would learn many things here. With renewed confidence, Ronan headed toward the written exam hall. After all, he had spent a full month cramming desperately, and every point he had studied was burned into his memory. But when the exam ended, Ronan completely shut down. Seeing that, Maria and Asher looked utterly confused. Didn't I tell you to read every book in the bag? How did you only cover less than 30% of the material? It turned out Ronan had only taken a few books out to study at first, but he got so focused on those that he completely forgot there was still a huge stack of books left inside the bag. Maria was speechless. She never thought someone this dumb could actually exist. But seeing how devastated Ronan looked, she hurried to comfort him. The practical exam matters way more than the written one. With your strength, you'll be fine. Just then, a massive magic circle appeared out of thin air. Everyone immediately rushed over in nervous anticipation, searching for their names. Before long, Maria and Asher found theirs. Asher, Magic Division, Practical Exam, rank 12th, tied for first on the written exam. Maria, Martial Division, Practical Exam, rank 9th, written exam, rank 9th. Having passed, the two hugged each other excitedly, overwhelmed that all their hard work had finally paid off. In her excitement, Maria turned toward Ronan, eager to ask what his ranking was. But what she saw instead was Ronan standing there with a dead look on his face. My name isn't on there. Hearing that, both of them were stunned. You gotta be kidding. Are you sure you look carefully? Ronan insisted that he had already checked dozens of times and had not even missed the corners. The instant he finished speaking, a thunderous explosion shook the air. It was the Academy's special privilege for the top 3 students in each department. The Glorious Phoenix itself would use magic to announce their results. With a sharp cry from the Glorious Phoenix, a fireball shot straight toward Ronan. When it exploded right in front of him, his results were revealed in glowing letters. Martial Division, Practical Exam rank 1, Written Exam rank 5,712, Overall Department rank 2. Maria and Asher instantly screamed in excitement. Ronan, you got second place overall, just off your practical score? Even Ronan was shocked, and he could not help praising how sharp the professor's judgment was. But then something suddenly hit him. Wait, if I ranked first in the practical exam, doesn't that mean that got lost to me? With his personality, there's no way he'll let that go. Before Ronan could slip away, a cold voice sounded from behind him. So, you're the one who took first place in the practical exam. The person who had arrived was none other than Shuri Pan, the future Sword Saint and one of the Empire's rising stars. Ronan immediately panicked a little and insisted he had the wrong person. That was because Shuri Pan had an extremely competitive nature and could never tolerate someone being better than him with a sword. Hearing that, Shuri Pan's brow twisted sharply. Why are you lying? Ronan merely spread his hands, absolutely refusing to admit it. Just because you say I'm first doesn't make it true. If we're talking seriously, then show me proof. Shuri Pan let out a cold laugh. Then I'll prove it to you. As he spoke, the long sword in his hand shot forward with a piercing whistle through the air, aimed straight at Ronan's face. But Ronan still blocked it with ease. That's the proof. If you weren't first place, there's no way you could have reacted in time. Now let me see just how strong you really are. Ronan was annoyed. He could not believe this lunatic had not changed at all, and in the very next second, he suddenly leaped backward. At the same time, with a twist of his wrist, 3 condensed waves of sword aura slashed straight toward Shuri Pan. Even though Shuri Pan still managed to force down all 3 incoming strikes, the sheer power behind them made his fingers tremble uncontrollably. That's my strength. Satisfied now, Ronan had thought this would finally be the end of it, but to his surprise, Shuri Pan came charging at him again with sword in hand. I admit your swordsmanship is excellent, but it still hasn't reached the point of surpassing mine. So show me all the strength you've been hiding. What you've shown so far still isn't enough to convince me. Looking at the increasingly fierce look in Shuri Pan's eyes, Ronan felt his head start to ache. This was exactly why he never wanted to run into a guy like him. If this kept going, Shuri Pan might even use aura, and with Ronan's body in its current state, there was no way he could take that. Thinking that, Ronan turned and ran without the slightest hesitation. The broad-shouldered Shuri Pan flew into a rage. What are you doing? In a fight, how can you turn your back on your enemy? But Ronan completely ignored him and ran straight behind Asher, then cleanly and shamelessly pulled Asher in as a human shield. Seeing that, even Shuri Pan did not dare attack recklessly. You despicable coward, using a woman as a shield? You don't deserve to be called a knight. Ronan only answered with a sly grin. You really haven't changed. Even if it kills you, you will still cling to that so-called knightly code. The instant he finished speaking, Ronin clenched his fist and drove it straight into Shuripan's nose. Then added, and here's one more secret. Asher's a guy. That brutally painful punch made Shuripan's vision go black in an instant. By the time he recovered and opened his eyes again, Ronin had already dragged Asher so far away they were long gone. Just then, Fillion's guard squad came rushing over. The bald guard captain froze the moment he saw the injured Shuripan. Lord Shuripan, we heard you got into a fight. Just tell us what the other person looked like, and our guard unit will put out a wanted notice immediately. Hearing that, Shuripan brushed the dust off himself. You don't need to speak to me so respectfully. Right now, I'm not a Duke's son. I'm just a Filion applicant, and you don't need to interfere. It was nothing more than a fair fight. I'll handle it myself. But then Shuripan's eyes suddenly sharpened. A crack had appeared in the sword in his hand, a blade forged from the finest mithril. He had already known Ronin was impressive, but he never expected him to achieve something like this with such an ordinary sword. Shuripan suddenly smiled in relief, his eyes burning with the thrill and obsession of finally finding a worthy rival. Ronin, I'll remember that name. Early the next morning, in a forest near the imperial capital, Ronin was staring down at the map in his hands, carefully checking the route. Meanwhile, Asher still looked distracted the whole time. Ronin, are we really okay doing this? I heard the guy you fought yesterday is the heir of the Grancia family, one of the great houses second only to the royal family. Ronin brushed the concern aside, saying Asher was worrying for nothing. Shuripan was just obsessed with swordsmanship. As a person, he was actually pretty decent. He had his own faith and principles. Calling him the perfect model of nobility would not even be an exaggeration. If he really wanted to make trouble, the two of them would already be eating prison breakfast by now. After a long trek, Ronin finally found the place Professor Baron had told him about, a river called Penarl-Decim, and what people called a magic ley vein was the magic drifting through the world, which, for some reason, gathered into one place and formed a lake-like concentration of magical energy. Just the magic leaking from one part of it was enough to transform nearby ordinary stones into high-grade mana stones, and even common weeds could become priceless miracle herbs. That was exactly why its value was immeasurable and why most people wanted to claim such a place for themselves. Even Ronin was surprised. He had not expected Professor Baron to entrust them with a place this valuable. At the side, Asher felt the magical power flowing through the air and his eyes filled with shock. It was the first time in his life he had ever sensed such overwhelming magic. He was convinced that if he cast a spell here, he could easily use high-tier magic that he normally could never pull off. Even more amazing, the egg Ophi had left with Ronin was now glowing brilliantly, absorbing magic at a terrifying rate. Then Asher seemed to realize something. Ronin, doesn't this feel strange? According to Professor Baron, a place this rich in magic should attract a large number of fantasy species and ordinary animals. But from the moment we got here until now, we haven't heard a single animal sound. Asher's words hit Ronin like a bucket of ice water and instantly woke him up. He shot to his feet and drew in a deep breath. In the next second, his nose caught the faint trace of blood in the air. Ronin rubbed at his brow, sounding utterly helpless. Why is it that trouble follows me everywhere I go? Asher, find somewhere to hide first. I smell blood. Sure enough, in the next instant, 5 arrows glowing with magical light came shooting out from deep within the forest. Just as the arrows were about to hit, Ronin's eyes turned cold. With one clean motion of blade and hand, all 5 arrows were instantly cut in half. Looking at the style of those arrows, Ronin suddenly remembered something. Back then, one of the members of his old squad had come from Karibru, and Ronin had learned a great deal about Karibru through him. These specially made arrows could only be used by Hound, class members who had successfully poached more than 100 times. On the other side, the poachers who witnessed all of this were stunned. What the hell was that? He cut down every arrow with a single strike. Before they could figure out what to do, Ronin was already rushing toward them at high speed. The purple-haired man at the front snapped back to his senses and quickly lowered his voice, ordering the others to spread out and attack from different angles. Ronin's heart sank. Hound-class hunters really were nothing like the 2 small fry he had run into before. At least these ones knew to pin down their target first. In the next second, Ronin abruptly stopped and shouted at them, "Don't attack. I'm on your side." That instantly made the poachers hesitate. What kind of bullshit are you talking about? Seeing that they were starting to doubt, Ronin continued, "I'm Ahayut, the youngest hound in the Damas branch." Hearing that, the group cautiously gathered back together. But the purple-haired leader still looked suspicious. "A brat like you, still wet behind the ears, being on the same level as me?" Ronin immediately flashed a provocative grin, his tone dripping with disdain. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean nobody else can. If you don't believe me, go ask your branch's wild wolf. That instantly made the purple-haired man snap in humiliation. He grabbed Ronan by the collar. You got a death wish, kid? Seeing that, the others hurried to break it up. Calm down. This guy really does know things only insiders should know. We should check with the captain first. If this is real, causing conflict with another branch could get ugly. Their arguing ended up alerting the captain not far away. Wasn't I told you to keep watch quietly? Why are you making such a racket? The pressure coming off Wild Wolf was enough to make everyone freeze. The purple-haired man hurried over to the bald man and explained everything that had just happened in full detail. After hearing it, the bald man's expression darkened at once. By our rules, this is the territory of the Demirai branch. What are you doing here? Ronan suddenly burst into laughter. Sorry about that. I wouldn't really know, seeing as I'm not actually a Hayut. Before the words had even fully left his mouth, Ronan's sword flashed from its sheath again. The 4 poachers around him died on the spot. The bald man's face changed drastically, and he immediately reached for the sword at his waist. But Ronan gave him no time to react and lunged forward in a single step. Another flash of cold steel cut through the air, and the bald man's head separated cleanly from his body. Then Ronan pulled out a sheet of paper and tossed it in front of the purple-haired man. If you want to live, mark every branch location you know on this. Very quickly, the purple-haired man handed Ronan a completed map. Then, trembling all over, he said, "You promised you'd spare me. You're going to keep your word, right?" Ronan said nothing at first, then answered with his actions. "Of course not. I say one thing and do another all the time." But just as Ronan was about to turn around and head back, the egg in his bag suddenly began to shake violently. Before Ronan could untie the bag and inspect it, Asher suddenly went pale and pointed into the distance with a trembling hand. The dark red blood beside the corpses of the creatures Karibru had slaughtered was suddenly lifting off the ground all at once and rising into the air. In the next instant, the scattered blood gathered into a raging wave and surged straight toward the 2 of them. Ronan immediately tightened his grip on his sword and took up a combat stance. But the egg at his waist burst out of the bag on its own and shot straight into the center of the blood wave, greedily absorbing its energy. The bizarre sight filled Ronan with questions, but one thing was certain. Whatever was going to hatch from that egg was absolutely no ordinary creature. Once the blood wave had been completely drained away, cracks began spreading rapidly across the eggshell. Ronan could no longer suppress his excitement, and the moment he leaned in closer, a sudden force slammed straight into his nose. When he came back to his senses, he found a strange little creature with jet black fur standing before him. The 2 of them stared at the oddly shaped little thing in total surprise, unable to help wondering, where had this little monster absorbed its energy from to turn out like this? Ronan cautiously reached out a hand, and the little creature gently rubbed its head against his fingertip. But thinking about how his handsome face had just taken a hit, Ronan still muttered in fake annoyance, "You may be cute, but your way of greeting people is way too extreme." We start with a headbutt. The moment he finished speaking, a magic circle suddenly formed above the little thing's head. Under the glow of the spell, the swelling on Ronan's face vanished instantly. Ronan was stunned and delighted. He had not expected the little creature to know healing magic. Just as he was about to name it Sita, the little thing's expression suddenly sharpened, and it shot off in one direction. Seeing that, Ronan could not help looking surprised. He had not expected something that had just been born to already have senses this sharp. And the one Sita was chasing was none other than Barlas, the lone surviving member of Karibru. The guy had only gone off to relieve himself, and when he came back, he found that every one of his teammates had already been wiped out. After hiding behind a tree and witnessing the entire hatching process, he had panicked and run for his life. But before he could get very far, he tripped over a tree root and crashed to the ground. Sita immediately pounced and began sucking blood from his wound. That terrified Barlas so badly that he instantly started begging for mercy. Fortunately, Ronan arrived in time and stopped Sita. But Ronan had no intention of attacking Barlas. Instead, he asked with an oddly concerned tone, "Barlas, you're not hurt too badly, are you?" Barlas jerked his head up, his face full of fear. "Thanks to you. I'm still alive. But how do you know my name?" Before he could finish, Ronan had already placed his sword against Barlas's throat. "You don't need to know that. All that matters is that I'm glad to see you again." It turned out Barlas was the very man who had left Karibru and joined Ronan's squad in his previous life. A smile tugged at Ronan's lips. "My talkative friend from Karibru, I happen to need a favor from you. But just so we're clear, I'm not asking." Hearing that, Barlas instantly broke down in tears and swore that as long as Ronan spared his life, he would do absolutely anything. After settling Barlas down, Ronan took Asher back to the magic ley vein. Professor Barron had mentioned that the spring water from the ley vein was also extremely valuable. So Ronan filled a bottle with it and planned to find out what it was worth. To Ronan's surprise, Maria's father was willing to buy it for 20 gold coins per bottle, which sent Ronan into silent delight. At that rate, he could practically achieve financial freedom just by selling the water. On the way, Asher could not help getting nosy and asked what Ronan planned to do with all that money. After all, Ronan had placed second, which meant full tuition exemption and a pretty generous scholarship every year. Ronan thought for a moment. The entrance ceremony is in a few days. I want to bring my sister into the city. Before long, Ronan's sister, Iller, had been brought into town. And the very first thing Iller did when she saw Ronan was anxiously ask whether he had done anything illegal. The carriage Ronan had sent to pick her up had simply been way too luxurious. Ronan just smiled and told her not to worry. Then he dragged her through one noble clothing shop after another and started buying everything in sight. Looking at the extravagant clothes, Iller seemed uneasy. I know you've made some money lately, but buying me gifts this expensive is a little too much, isn't it? Ronan, however, did not think much of it. His sister had suffered plenty for his sake before, and now it was finally her turn to enjoy life a little. His sister's eyes filled with tears. That little brat from back then had really grown up. Then she excitedly ran toward the door, waving her arms. Everyone, come look. Look what a wonderful boy my little brother is. After buying out practically the whole store, Ronan planned to take his sister out for a huge meal. But the moment Ronan pushed the door open, he froze. Shuri Pan was standing right outside, asking why he'd spent so long in there. Ronan nearly jumped out of his skin. Why are you here? Don't tell me you're some kind of stalker. Shuri Pan explained that he was only there to pick up his new fittings, and since he had happened to run into Ronan on the way, he just waited for him there. Ronan looked speechless. That's still stalking. Don't push me into beating you up on the happiest day I've had in a while. Shuri Pan refused to back down and gripped his sword hilt. That works for me. Just as the tension between them was about to explode, Ilir suddenly stepped in front of Ronan. Ronan, haven't I told you before that you need to speak politely? Cold sweat nearly broke out on Ronan's back. Sis, you've got it wrong. The bastard behind you started it. But Ilir only kept a stern face and wagged a finger at him. So your wings have grown in now. You make a mistake and still talk back? After scolding Ronan, Ilir lifted a hand and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, then turned to apologize to Shuri Pan. I'm truly sorry. My little brother can be rough around the edges, but he's actually very kind. It's my fault for not disciplining him properly, so please forgive him. Shuri Pan instantly panicked, and a flush rose across his face before he could stop it. The heart that had once beaten only for the sword lost its rhythm for the first time because of a woman pounding like thunder in his chest. Then Shuri Pan stammered out that Ilir had done nothing wrong and that he was the one who had been too reckless. Delighted, Ilir grabbed Shuri Pan's hand. I can't believe you're this generous. I'm so glad Ronan has a friend like you. That sudden gesture made Shuri Pan's already flustered mind short-circuit completely, and even breathing started to feel difficult. In a panic, he pulled out a pure gold identity token. I'm really sorry for interrupting your time together as siblings. This is my family's identity token. It works in every place across the Empire, so please take it as my apology. Last time, even my own sword was damaged, so Ronan's can't come out of it in good shape either. If you want to buy swords, go to the Great Forge at the far west end of Workshop Street. It has a history of 500 years. Ordinary people can't just walk in, but with this token, you'll have free access. After saying that, Shuri Pan fled in embarrassment. Ronan, meanwhile, stood there questioning his entire life and could not get a single word out. That token alone was valuable enough to buy a small city. Was that really the same Shuri Pan he knew? Not long after, the entrance ceremony officially began. Headmaster Kratatet stepped onto the stage and declared in a ringing voice, "Welcome, geniuses of the 791st class. The entrance ceremony now begins." What followed was an unbelievably long speech that had Ronan fighting back yawns. But just then, the headmaster snapped his fingers. The sky split open at once, revealing a pale violet space beyond it. Then, in a flash of blinding light, everyone was teleported onto an arena. Before the crowd could even process what had happened, the headmaster announced, "Now we move to the final part of the assembly, the upperclassmen meeting match." This so-called meeting match was a special event unique to Philion Academy. The first and second place first-year students could choose any one of the top 4 second years for a one-on-one combat spar. Although new students had the right to refuse, Ronan had no intention of giving up, because he wanted to use this chance to show his sister that he already had the strength to protect himself out in the world and would not be bullied anymore. With that in mind, Ronan looked toward the headmaster and said that if possible, he wanted to challenge all 4 seniors by himself at the same time. The instant those words came out, every teacher below the stage was stunned. The seniors' eyes were also full of shock and anger. The headmaster quickly turned to Nai Byerger at his side and asked whether she agreed to Ronan's request. Nybyrager strongly supported it. Do exactly as he says. After all, the greatest principle at Philion is that strength comes first. If things get out of hand, I'll step in immediately. After weighing the pros and cons, the headmaster ultimately agreed to Ronan's request. But up in the stands, Ronan's sister looked deeply worried, telling him that if anything felt wrong, he should give up immediately. In response, Ronan just smiled and waved at her, telling her not to worry. At the headmaster's signal, Nesta was the first to move, turning into a blur as he charged forward. Ronan bent low and barely avoided the strike. A trace of surprise crossed his face. This guy was actually several times faster than Maria when she used her magic combat technique. Before he had time to think any further, Karen's spear shot toward his vitals like a venomous snake. Seeing there was no time to dodge, Ronan immediately raised his sword to block. But the force behind the blow was so fierce that it sent him sliding back several meters. Before he could even get back up properly, Bram had already lifted a giant sword as tall as a man behind him. Ronan, why would you choose something like this? I had wanted to fight you fairly, face to face. As he spoke, he brought the sword down with all his strength. The other three had already prepared their follow-up attacks as well. The relentless chain of attacks made Ronan inwardly admire them. Any one of them alone was already highly skilled, and their teamwork was excellent too. Then, in the next instant, Ronan's figure vanished from the sight of all four. Their attacks all struck empty air. Before they could recover from their shock, Ronan had already rushed in at blinding speed. His body moved like a ghost among the three of them, weaving through their positions and delivering one heavy strike to each. Seeing that he was the only one left, Bram actually grew more excited and immediately charged forward with his giant sword. But at the exact instant Ronan swung his blade, Bram had the strange impression that he was seeing Professor Nybyrager standing there. By the time he snapped out of it, the giant sword in his hands had already been shattered by Ronan. The entire arena fell into silence at first, and then erupted into cheers loud enough to shake the sky. No one had expected that a freshman could really defeat the top 4 second years all by himself. Meanwhile, the 4 defeated upperclassmen stood frozen in place, questioning their entire lives. Ronan paid none of that any mind and looked straight toward his sister in the audience. She was gripping the arm of a nearby spectator and shouting excitedly, "Did you see that? That's my little brother." After thinking for a moment, Ronan walked over to the 4 seniors who were still standing there in disbelief and gave them a deep 90-degree bow. "Thank you for your hard work, seniors. All 4 of you were far stronger than I imagined. Thanks to you, I was able to learn a great deal in this exchange. I'm truly grateful that you accepted the challenge of such an immature underclassman. I hope you can forgive the disrespect I showed today, and I ask for your guidance in the future as well." Down below, Maria and Asher were left staring in complete disbelief, wondering if Ronan had somehow taken the wrong medicine. Even the seniors looked at one another, not knowing what to say. Bram, who had just been crushed with despair moments earlier, suddenly jumped up. "I can't believe it. This underclassman is insanely strong and this polite too?" Then he raised Ronan's hand high in the air. "You don't need to be so modest. You beat us fair and square with your own strength, so don't worry. That's exactly what Philion stands for." Ronan gave a sheepish grin. Just now, he had not only proven with his own strength that he could protect himself, but he had also quietly shown that he understood how to handle people with tact. His sister definitely would not have to worry about him all the time anymore. Sure enough, in the stands, his sister was already in tears, overwhelmed by how much Ronan had truly grown. Meanwhile, in one corner of the audience, a purple-haired woman was watching Ronan in silence. A meaningful smile curved at her lips. What an interesting guy. That night, the banquet hall of Philion Academy blazed with light. Asher stared at the luxurious scene before him, so stunned he could barely close his mouth. Maria, on the other hand, did not care in the slightest and was already stuffing a glistening roast lamb leg into her mouth. When the late-arriving Ronan finally appeared, Asher asked whether he had already sent his sister off. Ronan nodded. Before leaving, she kept reminding me of one thing after another. I spent a little extra time trying to reassure her. Just in case, I also sent Sita along to protect her. Then Ronan picked up a drumstick, ready to finally dig in. But at that very moment, Shuripan suddenly appeared behind him like a ghost. "Can you really eat in peace right now?" Ronan nearly turned pale from the fright. "You just won't go away, will you? What exactly do you want?" Shuripan calmly pulled a small notebook from his chest, his face completely serious. "I'm only here to confirm something important. Where's Miss Iller's hometown? What are the roads like on the way back? Is the local security reliable? Are bandits common there?" Ronan was left completely dumbfounded. This was the important matter he had been talking about. Shuripan's face darkened at once. "Of course it's important. I assume you've assigned guards to protect her personally, or at the very least hired a mercenary group. Otherwise, you're no better than the criminals of Rodlon." Ronan exploded on the spot. "I sent someone even more reliable than a mercenary group. As long as a dragon doesn't suddenly fall out of the sky, my sister will be perfectly safe, so stop sticking your nose into it. But Shuripan suddenly froze, a fine sheen of cold sweat appearing at his temples. Then doesn't that mean, if a dragon really did show up, Miss Iller would be in danger? Ronan felt like his head was about to split. You lunatic, enough already. Why do you care so much about my sister's business? She's my sister. What does she have to do with you? That question left Shuripan instantly speechless, stammering without being able to say a word. Just as the atmosphere turned painfully awkward, a voice with a trace of laughter cut in. What an amusing scene. To think the wild wolf of House Grancia could have a side this noisy. Shuripan turned around, and disgust immediately showed on his face. What do you want now? The person who had arrived was none other than Alberbet, the first-place student in the Magic Division this year. Don't misunderstand. I'm not here for you. Right now, the only one I'm interested in is Ronan. Hearing that, Shuripan visibly relaxed. So Ronan's the one who stirred up your twisted curiosity. Anyway, I've already said what I needed to say, so do whatever you want. With that, he turned to leave. But after only a few steps, Shuripan turned back again. Ronan, I still think it would be safer to send my family's guards. At those words, veins bulged on Ronan's forehead. I'm begging you, just get lost already. After Shuripan finally left, Alberbet pulled out a purple brooch and handed it to Ronan. I came here because I have a proposal for you. The moment Ronan saw the brooch in his hand, his pupils contracted sharply. In his previous life, General Adeshan had once given him an identical brooch. One had to remember that House Acrogia and Shuripan's House Grancia were known as the Empire's two great pillars. Unlike those nobles who valued bloodlines above all else, House Acrogia had always believed in a family creed where talent came first. They offered opportunities to outstanding talents, and the symbol of that opportunity was the brooch now resting in Ronan's hand. I believe you understand what this means. I hope you'll make the wise choice. After all, if a bee stays in a flock of sheep for too long, sooner or later it starts acting like one. Very soon, the first day of enrollment arrived. This academy, whose creed was strength above all else, displayed class differences from the very moment student housing was assigned. Students in the middle ranks all lived in apartments with private single rooms and free buffet dining, making dorm life remarkably comfortable. Meanwhile, the bottom 30% were crammed into a crooked wooden shack in the far corner of the academy grounds. That group even included a few pampered sons of noble families, and on the first day, they usually raised hell about it. The teachers could only patiently explain that the only way out was to study hard. Otherwise, they would still be living there next semester. As for the top 10%, including Ronan, each student was assigned an entire villa. The place could only be described as dazzlingly luxurious. Even Ronan had to suck in a sharp breath at the sheer extravagance. While he was touring the rooms, a document on the desk caught his attention. It was Filian's course registration form, where students were free to choose what they wanted to study. As the tip of his pen flew rapidly across the page, Ronan smiled at the completed form. He had signed up for nearly 2/3 of all available classes. After finishing, he could not help curling his lips upward, already looking forward to how full and rewarding his future academy life would be. That dream shattered the very next day. On the training grounds of basic swordsmanship, the instructor was staring at him with a stern expression. "Student Ronan, you won't need to attend this class anymore." Ronan froze. "Teacher, class has barely even started." The instructor suddenly burst into laughter. "That's exactly what I was about to say. In this short amount of time, you've already learned every form of imperial swordsmanship and can execute them flawlessly. If I let you stay here, the other students are going to start questioning their entire existence." With that, the teacher handed him his first course completion certificate. After that, whether it was swordsmanship practice or magical beast hunting, nearly every class ended the same way. Ronan cleared them all early. With nothing left to do, Ronan sat by a small river on campus and began contemplating life. Who knew how much time passed before Nyberger suddenly appeared beside him. "Shouldn't you be in class at this hour? What are you doing sitting here?" Before Ronan could answer, she let out a light laugh. "Actually, I think I already know. You've probably finished all your classes, haven't you?" Ronan sighed. "I thought Filion would be a lot more impressive than this. It's nowhere near what I imagined." Nyberger did not refute him. After all, this boy had only seen her secret swordsmanship once and had already reproduced 70 to 80% of its essence. His talent really was monstrous. Then Nyberger removed the sword at her side. "As one of Filion's professors, I don't particularly like hearing that." As she spoke, she gestured for Ronan to hand over the sword in his hand. "So let me teach you a proper lesson." Just as Ronan was still confused, a sword aura infused with magic flashed past the side of his ear. In the very next second, the lake behind him exploded, and a wall of water dozens of meters high erupted into the sky. But Nyberger only sighed. As expected, With a chunk of scrap metal like that, this is about all it can do. Something that can't even carry magic properly doesn't deserve to be called a weapon. All it does is hold its wielder back. With that, Naibyrager slowly drew her own sword. With nothing more than the same casual swing as before, she split the entire lake in two. The power was dozens of times greater than the last attack. Ronin stared in disbelief. The posture was the same. The force was the same. So why was the difference so overwhelming? He had always believed that a weapon was nothing more than a consumable tool. Seeing him standing there utterly stunned, Naibyrager curled her lips into a satisfied smile. I think you know now what you're missing. You may not look like someone who can use magic yet, but I believe you'll grasp it someday. Even if it's only for the day you finally start weaving magic into your sword techniques, you need a weapon that truly suits you. After a moment of thought, Naibyrager told Ronin to start attending her class from now on. Ronin instantly looked up. Your class? Isn't it only open to second years and above? That may be true, but I'll apply for a special exception. However, there's one condition if you want to attend. You need to find yourself a proper weapon first. So Ronin, along with Asher and the others, headed straight for the forge Shuripan had mentioned. But staring at the run-down little shack in front of them, none of them could believe this was really the forge house Grancia frequented. And when Ronin and the others pushed the door open, the inside was completely empty. Just as the three of them were puzzled, a giant furry hand suddenly pushed open another door deeper inside. The next moment, a werewolf towering over 2.5 meters tall stood before them, glaring viciously and demanding to know what they wanted. Ronin immediately took out House Grancia's token and explained that he had come to buy a weapon. The werewolf, however, let out an unconcerned yawn. We don't do business with brats here. You can get lost. Then his gaze suddenly locked onto Asher. Although, I do happen to be hungry right now. If you're willing to give me one of this guy's arms, I might consider serving you. That scared Asher half to death, and he quickly blurted out that he was filthy and definitely not tasty. Ronin's eyes instantly turned cold. His right hand snapped the sword free, and the tip shot straight toward the werewolf's stomach. But although the werewolf flinched in pain, there was not a single wound on his body. In the next second, a transparent armor, glowing with faint blue light, slowly materialized over him. Seeing Ronin tighten his grip on the sword again, the werewolf's expression changed instantly. Wait, misunderstanding. This is all a misunderstanding. It's just a rule of our forge. First-time customers have to pass a strength test. And I also want to test how effective this transparent armor of mine really is, so I deliberately provoked you. The explanation sounded ridiculous, but Ronin somehow felt the guy was not lying, so he slowly put his sword away. My advice is that next time, you should save that routine for midday instead. Then the werewolf completely dropped his earlier arrogance and turned to Asher with a grin. Sorry about that. I probably scared you. But don't worry, I don't eat people. My name is Didaway. I'm the gatekeeper of this forge. This place is only the entrance. Now let me take you to the real workshop. Then Didaway led the group farther inside. He pressed hard on a button hidden in the crack between the bricks. With a sharp click, the rumbling of turning gears began rising from underground. The stone floor beneath their feet suddenly started shaking violently. In the next moment, the entire ground beneath them sank rapidly, carrying them downward. None of them had expected that a whole underground city was hidden below. And this was none other than Perukia, the biggest and finest forge in the imperial capital. Didaway thumped his chest. Since you passed my test, Ronin, I'm naturally going to do my duty and show you something worthwhile. Not this underground city. What I'm really taking you to see is the greatest master smith in the Empire. It did not take long for Didaway to lead Ronin and the others to the deepest forge in the underground city. The old man hammering metal inside was a legendary craftsman with 400 years of forging experience. Hearing the commotion Didaway made, Dulin stopped swinging his hammer. Didn't expect you to bring 3 people in at once. That must mean one of them has enough skill to deserve being here, right? Didaway immediately straightened his back proudly. Pointing at Ronin behind him, he said, of course, this kid's strength will absolutely blow your mind. But seeing how young and immature Ronin still looked, Dulin clearly did not believe it. Talk is cheap. Since forging a sword needs to match its wielder, why not let him show me what he can really do? Ronin was a little confused, but he still drew the black iron sword at his waist without another word. The moment Dulin saw that black iron sword, however, his expression turned dark. You call that scrap metal weapon? Before Ronin could answer, Dulin suddenly snatched the black iron sword out of his hand. Then he raised his hammer and brought it down in one crushing strike, splitting the sword clean in two. Don't tell me you've actually been carrying this garbage around and calling a weapon. Ronin's face darkened at once. That was the most usable blade he had managed to pick out from hundreds of swords. Old man, do you even know what you're doing? Dulin, however, casually pointed toward the swords in the shop. Take your pick. Call it gift. Any blade in here. I guarantee it's hundreds of times better than that piece of junk you were using. Hearing that, Ronan froze for a second and turned to look at Didaway. Seeing him nod, Ronan decided not to hold back and selected a mithril sword glinting with a cold sheen from the weapon pile. The moment it landed in his hand, he did feel that something about it was different, but he still had doubts. Could the gap really be this big? Then Ronan looked back at Dylan with some hesitation in his voice. You need to promise me first. No matter how much damage I cause, I'm not paying for it. Dylan waved dismissively. Go ahead and use your strongest sword art. No matter how much destruction you cause, I won't make you pay. Once he got that promise, Ronan lightly gripped the mithril sword's hilt, and in his mind appeared the sword technique Professor Nybarger had used the day before. Dylan's pupils immediately contracted. The sword intent around Ronan somehow carried a faint trace of Nybarger. In the next instant, the sword light came crashing down. With a deafening explosion, the walls of the forge were blown apart on the spot. A trench over 100 meters long split open across the ground. Both Ronan and Dylan stood frozen, completely dumbfounded. Dylan's earlier contempt was gone from his voice. I said you wouldn't have to pay, so don't worry. But I do have one question. Are you Nybarger's disciple? Ronan jolted. You know Professor Nybarger too? Dylan nodded, looking somewhat proud. Of course I do. The flying sword Urusha she carries was forged under my hammer. That's one of the rare masterpieces from my 400 years of blacksmithing. As he spoke, he suddenly burst out laughing. Then he reached out and lightly patted Ronan on the shoulder. I never would have imagined someone could unleash a slash this strong without magic reinforcement. I haven't seen a swordsmanship prodigy like you in nearly 100 years. But then Dylan frowned again. That said, your strength also creates a problem. Making a sword that truly suits you won't be easy. Even a mithril sword, famous for its hardness, can't survive your abuse. Ordinary materials won't withstand your power. We'll need the finest refined steel mixed with something special. The moment he finished speaking, Ronan's eyes suddenly lit up. He hurriedly searched his clothes, then took out a piece of Sita's eggshell and held it out. This is from a dream bird egg. It's the hardest thing I've ever seen. Maybe it could be used as material. The instant Dylan took the eggshell, he started hammering it. But after only a few blows, he was stunned. Even the hammer in his hand, made of mithril, failed to leave the slightest mark on the shell. Dylan's eyes lit up at once. Clutching the shell, he looked at Ronan urgently. I never imagined material like this could exist in the world. Are you really willing to let me forge with it? The moment Ronan gave him a firm yes, Dylan became positively radiant and slapped his chest in assurance. Come back in half a month. I'll forge you the best sword in the entire imperial capital. Ronan smiled with satisfaction and prepared to leave with Maria and Asher. But unexpectedly, Dylan called after them. And you two who came in with the honored guest. Since you're already here, you can't leave empty-handed. Go find the other smiths and have them forge weapons for you. Just say I sent you, and none of them will treat you poorly. As he spoke, Dylan started swinging his hammer again. I'd love to guide you there myself, but I'm sorry. Right now, all I can think about is refining this material. I can't focus on anything else. And amid the constant clang-clang of hammering, Dylan's face actually grew redder and redder. The sound of hammering this material is just too exciting. Please forgive the sight. The three of them were left staring blankly. No wonder Didaway had warned them on the way over that Dylan had a rather strange personality and asked them not to take it the wrong way. After that, Ronan took Maria and Asher to find another decent smith. Zwanwiki did not hesitate in the slightest and picked the highest grade materials available, while Ronan did not feel the least bit pained by the cost. After all, with the Grancia family token Shuripan had given them, every expense here was being covered by House Grancia. During the 2 weeks of waiting, with nothing much to do, Ronan could only wander around Philion. By sheer accident, he ended up at Professor Nybarger's advanced teaching grounds. Looking at the imposing teaching building before him, Ronan could not help muttering inwardly. Nybarger had told him to come to her class only after finding a truly suitable weapon. And now that he had obtained one from Dylan, it should finally meet her standard. Before he could sort out his thoughts, Nybarger had somehow already appeared right beside him. Before Ronan could even speak, she reached out and grabbed him by the ear. Long time no see, Ronan. I'm pretty sure I told you to come to my class the moment you found a proper weapon. So why are you only showing up now? Ronan was about to explain, but Nybarger dragged him toward the classroom instead. Save the excuses for the walk. Come with me first. Before long, Ronan was hauled straight into the training hall. Folding her arms, Nybarger addressed the students in front of her. This kid made enough noise at the upperclassmen meeting that I'm sure all of you already know who he is, so I won't bother with any extra introduction. Starting today, he'll be taking this class with the rest of you. The moment she said that, the whole place erupted. Naturally, there were more than a few mocking voices mixed in, but Ronan paid them no attention. As his gaze swept across the crowd, he spotted several familiar faces. Not only Bram and Nestu, whom he had fought during the upperclassmen meeting, but even his old rival Shuripan was among them. Just then, someone came hurrying over. She rushed up to Naibyrager, breathing hard, and quietly explained why she was late. Naibyrager did not scold her. Instead, she introduced Ronan to her. Hearing that, the girl immediately showed him a gentle smile. "It's nice to meet you." She was the teaching assistant for this course, Ade-shan, a second year in the martial division. Ronan froze on the spot. He never could have imagined that the woman who would one day become the first female Grand General in history through her extraordinary command ability. The so-called Iron Lady herself, Ade-shan, had once looked like such a warm and caring older sister type before joining the military. But that shock was quickly replaced by confusion. Ade-shan kept moving back and forth among the students. Was this so-called teaching assistant basically a babysitter? Could anyone just order her around however they liked? Just then, a male student walked over to Ronan. There was a probing edge in his tone. "Hey, Ronan. I'm Owen, a third year. I've heard a lot about your early performance at the upperclassmen meeting, so I was hoping to learn a thing or two from you. How about a spar?" But Ronan's attention was entirely fixed on Ade-shan right now, and he had no interest in sparring. Owen, however, refused to let it go. He suddenly turned and shouted at Ade-shan, "Hey, idiot over there, go get my practice spear." Hearing that, Ade-shan quickly nodded. "Okay, I'll bring it right away." But when she came running back holding the long spear, Owen deliberately picked a fight. "I switched to a short spear ages ago. Why are you still bringing me a long spear, idiot?" Ade-shan quietly tried to explain. "Sorry, Owen. Last class, you were still using the long spear." Before she could finish, Owen swung the spear and smashed it hard against her head. "You're a teaching assistant, and you can't even remember something this basic? What kind of joke is that? You weren't even qualified to attend these lessons in the first place. You only got this chance because you begged instructor Naibyrager, and now you can't even handle something this small." Before Owen could finish, Ronan had already grabbed the spear with a dark expression. "I accept your sparring request. So come fight me, you ill-mannered idiot." In Ronan's heart, Grand General Ade-shan was, aside from his sister, the person he respected most, and there was no way he would allow scum like this to humiliate her. Seeing that, Owen curled his lips into a smirk. "Weren't you the one who didn't want to spar a second ago? Don't tell me you're standing up for this idiot. Or is there some kind of dirty relationship between the two of you?" Before he could finish, Ronan thrust his sword hard into Owen's spear. The impact sent Owen flying back dozens of meters. Once he stabilized himself, disbelief was written all over his face. This guy had not even used magic, so how could the force behind that attack be this terrifying? Ronan stared at him with icy eyes. "You kept going on and on about using a short spear, so I helped you switch. Well, can we duel properly now?" Hearing that, Owen glanced down and saw that the spear in his hands had already snapped clean in two. The rage from being humiliated over and over instantly rushed to his head. Clutching the broken spear tip, he charged at Ronan like a madman. Watching the attack rush toward him, Ronan did not dodge right away. Only when the spear tip was just 0.01 centimeters from him did he suddenly move. With one casual swing, he sent Owen reeling back. Right after that, Ronan slammed the wooden sword hard across Owen's face. The force made Owen's vision go dark, and he nearly blacked out. But Ronan still was not satisfied. He rushed forward again and hit him with a Black Mamba Claw strike. After taking that whole combo, Owen collapsed to the ground and started twitching. Once it was over, Ronan lifted the wooden sword and pointed it at the few students who had been ordering Ade-shan around earlier. "Now it's your turn. You people run to bother someone else over every little thing. Is the teaching assistant your personal servant? Or do you just enjoy bullying people? Then come bully me instead. I'm very easy to bully." Seeing this, Ade-shan hurried forward and put herself in front of Ronan. "Stop it, Ronan. I don't know why you're making such a fuss over me, but I'm really fine, so please calm down." But Ronan had absolutely no intention of stopping. "I can't stand watching those idiots treat you like this. At least in this empire, no one gets to humiliate you." As he spoke, he gently pushed Ade-shan aside. "If I don't teach this whole pack a lesson today, I'm not stopping." Just then, Naibyrager's commanding voice suddenly rang out. "This farce ends now." The instant her words fell, a terrifying pressure descended over the entire place. Ronan froze where he stood. It wasn't that he didn't want to move, his body simply would not obey him. It felt as though a giant serpent lurking in the dark had locked onto him, making even breathing painfully difficult. "A moment ago, you were sparring, so I won't pursue what happened to Owen. On a real battlefield, he could end up suffering much worse. But if you mean to escalate this any further, then, as your teacher, I can't keep standing by." Ronan gritted his teeth, deeply dissatisfied with Naibyrager's inaction. She had clearly known the teaching assistant was being bullied, yet had chosen to stand aside and do nothing. Naibyrager offered no explanation, only hardening her tone. "This is a matter between me and my teaching assistant. It is not your place to interfere." I'll warn you one last time. Are you going to stop or not?" At those words, Ronin's eyes suddenly sharpened. He forced every ounce of strength through his body, trying to break free from Naibarger's oppressive aura. In the end, he succeeded. Slowly, he raised the wooden sword and pointed it at Naibarger. "Ask me as many times as you want. My answer won't change. Until I've done what I set out to do, I will not stop." Naibarger let out a helpless sigh. "Then I'll have to do this the hard way." And as she softly uttered the words "late gift," Ronin felt as though a giant serpent had opened its blood-soaked maw and lunged straight at him. In an instant, he lost consciousness and collapsed. In his dream, he saw that iron-blooded Grand General once again. Back then, even knowing that the war against the giants was almost certainly a death sentence, she had still accepted the commander's burden without hesitation. Ronin had once asked her why. Her answer was simple. Every person in this world carries a duty they cannot turn away from. The moment her words ended, the scene changed abruptly. It was the final moment when the 8-winged giant appeared. After handing him the bead, the Grand General had looked strangely relieved. "Ronin, I hope you never forgive me, because I selfishly handed the duty of protecting the Empire over to you." Ronin tried desperately to ask her what she meant, but then he jolted awake from the dream. What made the moment awkward was that Ade Shan was sitting right beside him, staring at him with a deeply worried look. Seeing that, Ronin hurriedly scratched his head and said it had only been a nightmare. Ade Shan fell silent for a moment, then softly asked, "You did all that just now because you wanted to stand up for me, didn't you?" Ronin's face immediately turned red. "No way. I just hated seeing people get bullied since I was little, that's all." Ade Shan could not help laughing. "Looks like you're not very good at lying, Ronin." Then her tone turned serious. "I hope you won't hold it against Instructor Naibarger or Owen. All of this was something I asked for myself. Normally, only Master Rank students are allowed to attend this class. I repeated a year, but I can still only barely control magic. Being allowed to listen in now is a special favor I don't really deserve. To keep Instructor Naibarger from feeling pressured, I specifically asked her to pretend not to notice no matter how the students treated me." Ronin was filled with disbelief after hearing that. In his previous life, the Grand General's aura had been so overwhelming it inspired awe. He had never imagined she too had once hit a wall. "Since I'm the one receiving this kindness, then I should also bear the price that comes with it. But even so, I still want to thank you." Ronin looked at her and hesitated for a long time before finally asking, "Are you working this hard because you want to become the Grand General?" The moment he said that, Ade Shan looked utterly stunned. "How did you know my dream is to become the Grand General? Did I accidentally let it slip at some point?" Then she suddenly clenched her fists, her eyes lighting up. "Even if I'm still nowhere near strong enough right now, I'm going to keep working for it." Seeing Ronin stare at her without saying a word, Ade Shan assumed he thought her dream was ridiculous. So she quickly explained, "I know it sounds unrealistic, but I'm not giving up. Everything I do is for the sake of reaching it." Looking at the longing shining in her eyes, Ronin felt even more conflicted. After all, in his previous life, Adeshin's final words had been for him to tell this version of her to just live quietly as a simple tailor. But the Ade Shan standing before him now was filled to the brim with stubborn devotion to her dream, and he simply could not bring himself to say those words. Even after she left, Ronin still could not say it. He truly had no idea what he should do. A few days later, just as Ronin was getting ready for bed, he received a letter from Dylan. So early the next morning, he eagerly brought Asher and Maria to the entrance of the forge. But when they entered, they found the place completely empty. Left with no other choice, they decided to try, finding their own way in. To their surprise, after Ronin randomly pressing around for a while, he actually found a hidden mechanism in the wall. As the elevator slowly descended, the sight before them left all three of them stunned. The once thriving underground city had now been reduced to utter ruin. Smiths lay scattered everywhere, dead or badly wounded. And only after Asher pointed it out did Ronin notice that a rock giant was rampaging through the underground city, hunting down the Smiths. Ronin made the call immediately and ordered the quicker Maria to run back to the academy for reinforcements. As for himself, he had Asher use telekinesis magic to help him descend at speed. Just as several Smiths were about to be crushed beneath the giant's massive fist, Ronin arrived in time at the critical moment. With one sharp flash of sword light, the heavy armor across the rock giant's chest was shattered apart. The blacksmiths he had saved all stared with their eyes wide open. They simply could not believe that this young boy, who still looked boyish, had killed a rock giant with terrifying defense in a single strike. Ronin landed firmly atop the giant's remains and quickly demanded to know what had happened. The Smiths, still shaken, explained the situation to him with trembling voices. Not long ago, dozens of rock giants had suddenly burst up from beneath the underground city. They smashed everything they saw and even tried to slaughter the Smiths. Most of the giants had taken Master Dulin and several top smiths before burrowing back underground and disappearing. The one Ronan had just killed was the final rock giant left behind here. Once he learned that the immediate danger had passed, Ronan left Sita and Asher behind to help treat the wounded. He decided to go rescue Dulin and Didaway first, considering that his sword was still in Dulin's hands. Meanwhile, deep beneath the ground, Dulin was clutching a sword wrapped in gray cloth, while Didaway, standing in front of him, was covered in wounds and clearly had been holding out for a long time. Looking at Didaway, Dulin's voice was full of guilt. "I'm grateful that you risked your life to chase after me and protect me, but you really didn't need to stay here. With your transparent armor, you could absolutely have escaped safely. Just go." But Didaway roared back angrily. "If you've got the energy to say all that defeat is crap, then swing the damn sword in your hands instead." Yet Dulin only hugged the sword tighter. "No, this sword is my masterpiece. Its first swing, a milestone like this, must not be tainted by someone like me who knows nothing of swordsmanship." Didaway nearly laughed from anger. "At a time like this, you crazy old man." Before he could finish, several rock giants had already surrounded them. Their enormous hands rose high into the air, clearly intending to smash the two of them into paste. Didaway gritted his teeth and took the blow head on, but the giant's strength far surpassed what he could bear. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and the defensive magic of his transparent armor shattered completely. Just as the giant's attack was about to come down again, a streak of red light shot in at terrifying speed, followed by countless sharp slashes flashing through the air. The surrounding rock giants did not even have time to scream before they were chopped into countless pieces. Then Ronan landed lightly before the two of them. "Leave the rest to me." Seeing Ronan appear out of nowhere, both Dulin and Didaway were stunned. There were so many rock giants on the way. "How did you get through them?" Ronan only gave a faint smile. "I took care of them while rescuing the other smiths. There are only a few left on your side now." As he spoke, he held out his hand to Dulin. "You'd better hand me my sword already. The blade I'm using now won't survive many more swings." Dulin hesitated for a moment, but in the end he unwrapped the cloth and handed the sword over. "This truly is a peerless blade forged just for you. The only pity is that I haven't had time to make a scabbard for it yet." The instant Ronan's hand closed around the hilt, his expression shifted. The sword was so light, it almost felt weightless. Yet in his palm, he could faintly feel a burning power flowing through it. "Perfect. Then let's use these rock giants, famous for their defense, to test this sword's power." Just then, several more rock giants closed in from ahead. Without a moment's hesitation, Ronan swung the sword, and a brilliant red sword aura roared out. The tyrannical force instantly blew the approaching rock giants into fragments. Even Ronan himself was stunned by the overwhelming power. So Professor Nyberger had not lied. There really could be such a huge gap brought by a weapon alone. Seeing that, Dulin's eyes shone brightly as he hurriedly asked whether La Mancha felt right in Ronan's hand. The sword's weight was as light as a feather, yet its hardness far surpassed mithril. And because of the dream bird eggshell, La Mancha also carried the special property of absorbing blood to repair its own damage, while La Mancha itself was the name of the explorer Dulin admired most. Ronan, for his part, did not hold back on praise, lavishing Dulin's craftsmanship with compliments. That made Dulin beam with delight. For a smith, there was no greater honor than having his work recognized. Just then, Ronan suddenly walked toward the corpse of one of the rock giants. Before long, he found a strange magic circle on the back of its head. By the natural habits of rock giants, they did not usually move in groups, and unless provoked, they ordinarily would not attack. So their abnormal assault on the underground city clearly had something to do with this magic circle. The group stared at the design for a long time without understanding it. Even Dulin, who had lived more than 400 years, shook his head and admitted he had never seen a pattern like it before. Even so, he could faintly sense that the magic remaining on it was not something an ordinary mage could have produced. A strong sense of unease rose in Ronan's heart at once. So he ordered Didaway to take Dulin and leave first, while he decided to head deeper in alone. Before he had gone very far, Ronan noticed something odd about the footprints on the ground. Besides the huge tracks of the rock giants, there were also several sets of footprints around the size of a human's. More than that, the walls around him were embedded with a number of magical detection stones used for warnings. But unfortunately for them, those things were useless against someone like Ronan, who had no magic. Soon, Ronan reached the deepest part of the cavern, and what he saw made his pupils contract sharply. Not far ahead stood a golden stone giant several times larger than the rock giants from before. Even though Ronan could tell the stone giant was still under seal, it radiated a suffocating pressure that made his skin crawl. Beneath the stone giant, two figures in white robes were standing there, speaking to each other in low voices. Ronan had just started moving closer, trying to catch what they were plotting, when a man in white suddenly curled his lips into a sinister smile. A flame instantly gathered in his palm. I caught that sulfur stench unique to a blacksmith shop a while ago. Didn't expect someone would actually be bold enough to come knocking. The moment he finished speaking, the man in white flung a blast of fire straight at Ronan. Luckily, Ronan reacted fast enough to twist aside and dodge it in time. Seeing his sneak attack miss, the man looked surprised. Well, the kid's got some moves after all. Fine, I'll tie you up first. Before his words had even fully fallen, countless burning chains shot out from his palm, lashing straight toward Ronan. Ronan's heart tightened at once. Anyone who could instantly cast physicalized magic on that scale was definitely no ordinary opponent. Gripping La Mancha tightly, Ronan shattered the incoming fire chains in a single instant. Then he let out a mocking smile. Who exactly are you people? No matter how desperate a man or woman get, this still isn't the kind of place for that. Ronan's arrogant attitude only seemed to amuse the man in white. I hope your strength is as impressive as your mouth. The woman in white beside him, however, frowned, clearly thinking he was just wasting time. But the man couldn't have cared less. Our mission's already done. The underground city has been destroyed. That alone is enough to drag the Empire's equipment-making technology way back. And this empire is about to be swallowed by Starlight anyway. So if we don't have some fun now, we'll never get another chance. That sentence exploded in Ronan's ears like thunder. It was almost exactly the same as what Yahello had said before dying. Ronan's eyes flew wide with fury. What the hell did you mean by that? You filthy rats. The sudden sharpness in Ronan's aura made the man in white freeze for a moment. Why did this brat suddenly feel so unsettling? But a second later, he snapped out of it and gathered fire in his palm once more. Yet before his hand could even finish rising, Ronan was already right beside him. The man in white never even saw the path of the blade. His arm and upper body were severed clean apart in the same instant. I still have a lot to ask you, so for now, just lie there and stay down. The woman beside him froze completely, cold sweat instantly soaking her back. Who are you? Ronan gave no answer. He stepped forward and seized her by the throat. There wasn't even a trace of warmth in his eyes. If you don't want to end up like him, you'd better answer my questions honestly. Ronan tightened his grip on the woman's throat, trying to force some answers out of her. Realizing she couldn't break free, Cyrilla immediately raised a magic shield, blasting Ronan backward several steps. Ronan looked down at his trembling, numb palm, and irritation flickered across his face. So this lady had clearly decided she wasn't going to cooperate. Before the words had even settled, a cross-shaped slash tore through the air, and Cyrilla's shield shattered on impact. Shock filled Cyrilla's face. How could this monster cut through her magic shield? Before she could think any further, Ronan's sword had already driven straight into her body. The strike knocked back her hood, revealing the pointed ears and delicate features that marked her elven bloodline. Ronan questioned her coldly. Didn't expect you to be a half-elf. What exactly are you and that guy trying to do? But before he could press further, a massive fireball came roaring straight at him. Ronan reacted instantly, spun around, and split the fireball apart with a single slash. Then he lifted his gaze through the firelight, and his expression immediately turned grim. Edward, whose limbs Ronan had severed earlier, was regenerating them at shocking speed. Edward stared at Ronan with bloodshot eyes, flames surging in his palm. It was obvious how much Cyrilla meant to him. You damn bastard, get away from her. Ronan answered by reversing his grip and driving his sword brutally into Cyrilla's thigh again. Looks like you still don't understand the situation. I'm giving you two choices. Either you both come with me quietly, or I cut this elf into pieces. I'm guessing she doesn't have the same regeneration you do, right? Edward trembled with rage from head to toe, but in the end, he still extinguished the flames in his palm. Fine, I'll go with you. Only then did Ronan nod in satisfaction. Smart choice. If you both die here, I'm the one taking the loss. But just as Ronan instinctively lowered his eyes towards Cyrilla at his feet, he saw a strange, chilling smile curl across her lips. Before Ronan could make sense of it, the rock giant radiating overwhelming pressure had already swung its massive arm straight at him. There was no time to dodge. Ronan could only raise his sword horizontally and take that earth-shattering blow head-on. The force of the impact sent him flying dozens of meters in an instant. Good thing Edward helped. Your fireball pulled the brat's attention away. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had time to cast a perception-blocking spell, let alone take control of this big guy. I only managed to move one of its arms, but with strength like that, the brat has to be seriously hurt by now. At those words, flames gathered in Edward's palm once again. Cyrilla, get back to the church and report what happened. I'll deal with this brat myself. This time, I'm not letting my guard down. But before he could even finish speaking, his limbs were severed again. In the next instant, Ronan's figure flashed in front of the two of them like a ghost. and a storm of razor-sharp slashes erupted once more, tearing Edward's body to pieces on the spot. Ronan seized the hostage and spoke in a chilling tone. "Where exactly do you think you're going to run? I already told you. I've got far too many questions for you." Cyrilla was so terrified by the sight that she staggered backward and hurriedly spread a magic circle in front of herself. Ronan, meanwhile, forced his battered body forward step by step. But just as he was about to strike again, his whole body suddenly stiffened, as if it had slipped completely out of his control. All Ronan could do was grit his teeth, grip the hilt tighter, and barely hold on to a fighting stance. That slash, just now, had already pushed his body far beyond its limit. The backlash from overloading it left him unable to move. But instead of taking advantage of the opening, Cyrilla activated a teleportation circle and prepared to escape. "I can't guarantee I'd beat you if I fought you right now, but you'd better be ready. Once I get back, we'll dig up everything there is to know about you. Your family, your friends, they'll all pay the price." Ronan desperately tried to stop her from leaving, but in his condition, all he could do was watch helplessly as Cyrilla stepped closer and closer to the teleportation circle. Just as her figure was about to vanish, an enraged shout carrying bone-deep cold exploded through the cavern. "Stop right there. I've got quite a few questions for you myself." The moment those words fell, the entire mine was swallowed by a strange and terrifying aura, and Cyrilla realized in horror that her body had stopped obeying her as well. Then a large, sharply defined hand shot out and clamped hard on her face. "Lately, you've racked up more than enough crimes worthy of death. But what pisses me off the most is that you dared to lay a hand on my disciple." The instant she finished speaking, a giant serpent as solid as flesh itself lunged forward with its maw wide open and snapped towards Cyrilla. In that instant, Cyrilla lost consciousness completely and collapsed to the ground. After dealing with everything, Nybyrager sheathed her sword and looked at Ronan. "Well done. You worked hard. Go get treated first. I'll report this to the headmaster, and then we'll send those two to Ruchelin." Hearing that, a flicker of surprise crossed Ronan's face. After all, Ruchelin, known as the Northern Nether Fortress, was a prison built in the middle of the sea. Rumor had it the screams and wails of prisoners echoed there all year long, and the guards used every method imaginable to force confessions out of people. Almost no one ever came out of that place whole. Thinking of that, Ronan suddenly stood up and grabbed Nybyrager by the hand. Then, in a voice that sounded almost pleading, he said, "Master, could you let me go to Ruchelin and witness their trial myself? This really matters to me." Nybyrager looked genuinely surprised. It was the first time she had ever seen that proud brat lower his head. "I'll think about it." Elsewhere, Perukia had already been reduced to ruins. Fortunately, thanks to everyone's efforts, the wounded were no longer in serious danger. Maria had only been helping move supplies, so she was still in relatively good shape. But Asher and Sita had nearly drained every last drop of magic power trying to heal the injured. Even so, what worried them more than anything else was Ronan's safety. He said he'd be back soon, but it's already been 2.5 hours. The moment those words fell, a familiar voice rang out beside them. "Were you talking about me?" The instant Sita saw Ronan return, her eyes reddened, and she rushed forward, wanting to heal him at once. But Ronan raised a hand and stopped her. "I already got treated down there. You all should rest first. Besides, I still have something more important to do." A few hours later, Nybyrager brought Ronan to the edge of a cliff. Soon after, a black griffin descended from the sky with several figures dressed in black standing on its back. The man in front bowed first. "Greetings, Lady Nybyrager. By order of the Empire, we've come to escort the prisoners." After giving a brief reply, Nybyrager explained the general situation of the two captives. The woman is a half-elf. Nothing especially unusual there. The other one's more troublesome. He has a rather bizarre regenerative ability. At that, a dark gleam flashed through the man's eyes. A regenerative ability? Huh? It's been quite a while since our place received such an interesting prisoner. Once the interrogator hears about this, he'll be delighted. With that, the group turned to leave with Cyrilla and Edward in tow. "We'll contact you again after the interrogation is over." Then Nybyrager turned to Ronan. "I've decided to grant your request. A week is more than enough time for Ruchelin to pry those people's mouths open. I'll let you know once we hear from them, so be ready to leave at any moment." In the days that followed, Ronan continued training under Nybyrager's guidance, while the restoration work in the underground city of Perukia moved forward at the same time. Before long, a full week passed in the blink of an eye. Inside Ruchelin prison, sharp screams and miserable wails still echoed without end. And after a full week of close contact, Kafka finally became certain that Edward had spilled everything he knew. So Kafka sent word to Nybyrager that Ronan could be brought over. Looking at the two standing before him, Kafka spoke with a warm, easy smile. "Let me introduce myself first. I'm the interrogator assigned to these prisoners, and I'm also the one receiving you today. Kafka, please come with me. I'll explain the results of the interrogation on the way." Looking at the gentle old man in front of him, Ronan found it hard to believe that he was actually Ruchalin's interrogator. Naibyrager, meanwhile, saw right through Ronan's thoughts at a glance. That's what almost everyone says the first time they meet him. But appearances can be deceiving. Every prisoner who falls into his hands ends up wishing death would set them free. He's the nightmare they fear most. Only after they reached the intersection of the prison did Kafka finally speak again. We're not far from the holding cells now, so I'll keep this brief. First, their background. They belong to an organization called Krakio. Naibyrager raised a brow at that. That name's new to me. Are they some kind of criminal group, like Karibru? Kafka continued, yes. But the fact that we still have no way of learning this organization's real intelligence is exactly why I believe they're even more dangerous than ordinary criminal groups. From the fire that destroyed the Naran granary to the explosion at the Arcane Research Institute, most of the major unexplained incidents across the Empire over the past year have now been confirmed as they're doing. Ronan froze when he heard that. If they had done so much, why had he never heard of them in his previous life? So Ronan quickly asked, "Interrogator, did they ever mention anything about Starlight? Or say something like the descent of the stars?" Kafka looked puzzled. That's the first time I've heard anything like that. Seeing that, Ronan awkwardly scratched his head. I happened to overhear it when I captured them, so I was wondering whether it might be connected to that organization's real objective. The moment he finished speaking, Kafka's expression darkened at once. He grabbed the bird-shaped hood beside him and pulled it over his head. A sick kind of excitement flashed in his eyes. To think I let the two of you see such a flaw in me on our very first meeting. How embarrassing. Looks like I still haven't been honest enough with my friends. I'll have to show them a little more sincerity. In the next second, Kafka's aura surged violently, and even Ronan felt the hairs on his body stand on end under that icy, sinister pressure. And when Ronan finally saw Edward and Cyrilla, he was stunned. The two who had been so arrogant before had already been tortured beyond recognition. Only their faint cries proved they were still alive. Then Kafka picked up a torture tool heated until it glowed red, speaking in a tone so flat it made the skin crawl. Edward is a particularly interesting friend. His body keeps regenerating under the unique power of black magic. And dealing with someone with that kind of healing ability is actually very simple. You just keep burning him until there's nothing left to regenerate. As he spoke, he drove the red-hot tool straight into Edward's chest without a moment's hesitation. Only when Edward was barely hanging on did Kafka finally stop. Haven't we already opened our hearts and become friends? Friends shouldn't keep secrets from one another. Don't you agree? Edward immediately burst into tears and cried that he was innocent, insisting he had hidden nothing at all. Hearing that, Kafka turned to Ronan. "Then why did I hear something about the descent of the stars from this guest here?" As he spoke, he shifted his gaze to Cyrilla. "Let me warn you first. I expect you to explain this clearly right now. Miss Cyrilla doesn't have an adorable regenerative ability like yours. So when I interrogate her, I have to be much more careful." Even so, Edward still showed no intention of talking, and instead only kept begging Kafka to kill him. Watching that, Ronan fell into thought. Their identities had already been exposed, yet they still refused to say a word. Maybe it wasn't that they didn't want to talk. Maybe they literally couldn't. Just like those death-sworn soldiers on the battlefield who carried critical secrets. Curse magic was often planted inside them beforehand to stop them from leaking anything if they were captured. Kafka froze when he heard that, then quickly turned and strode toward the door. "My apologies, you two. I performed terribly today. I actually forgot something that obvious. Please wait here for a moment. I need to fetch something." 2.5 minutes later, Kafka returned holding a grotesque object shaped like an eyeball. This is the Eye of Curse, a special tool capable of devouring curses. When we deal with prisoners who can't confess because of a curse, these precious little darlings are often a tremendous help. With that, Kafka pressed the Eye of Curse against Edward's forehead. In an instant, countless tendrils shot straight into his skull. As wave after wave of agonized screams rang out, the Eye of Curse kept overflowing with a deep blue glow. Only when Edward's pupils turned completely azure did the curse removal process finally come to an end. After that, Kafka immediately leaned in and asked, "My friend, let me ask you again. What exactly is this so-called descent of stars?" Edward gasped for breath in ragged pulls, his voice hoarse and weak. The stars are eternal beings. They are the only existence capable of saving all the weak on this land. And we, as the torches, will eliminate every unstable factor and wait for the child of the stars to descend from beyond the heavens. Hearing that, Ronan strode toward Edward with fury written all over his face. "The child of the stars you're talking about, is it Ahayut and the others?" At that, Extreme shock flashed across Edward's eyes. How do you know the name Ahayut? Beside him, the weakened Cyrilla hurriedly tried to stop him, but it was already too late. Edward's body suddenly began to swell at a terrifying speed. Seeing that, Ronan froze on the spot. Kafka reacted at once, yanking Ronan behind him, then throwing up a magic shield and forcefully blocking the self-destruction. Once the smoke cleared, Kafka let out a regretful sigh. Looks like two separate restrictions were planted inside him. The first prevented him from revealing anything related to the stars to outsiders. The second triggered self-destruction the moment he mentioned certain names. After saying that, Kafka grabbed Ronan's shoulder, his gaze turning dark. Lord Ronan, if my guess is correct, the name you just spoke should be highly classified information within their organization. So how exactly did you come to know it? The moment the question left his mouth, magic had already begun gathering quietly in his palm. He was clearly ready to force Ronan to stay until he explained everything. Ronan's expression didn't change in the slightest. He simply brushed Kafka's hand away. I just happened to overhear it when I captured them. Kafka knew perfectly well that Ronan was hiding something. But when he saw the raw hatred in Ronan's eyes toward the star giant, hatred so intense it was practically spilling over, he ultimately lowered his guard. He believed Ronan would never do anything that could harm the Empire. But before he could press him any further, a cold blade had already come to rest against his throat, and an icy chill spread through his whole body in an instant. Nybyrager's eyes blazed with ferocity. Are you planning to torture my disciple for answers right in front of me? Kafka instantly broke out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly let go of Ronan's hand, his voice filled with panic and respect. I only wanted to make sure. Former Sword Saint. Then he quickly bowed to Ronan as well. My apologies, Lord Ronan. I overstepped just now. The speed of that complete reversal left Ronan momentarily at a loss. After standing there awkwardly for a second, he finally waved it off, saying it was fine as long as the misunderstanding had been cleared up. Seeing that Ronan wasn't going to pursue it, Kafka finally let out a long breath of relief. Then he lowered his eyes to the eye of Curse lying on the floor, his tone full of regret. I can't believe this interrogation cost me an eye of Curse. What a waste. Cute as they are, these little things are even harder to catch than ordinary fantasy creatures. As he spoke, he turned toward the remaining eye of Curse perched on his shoulder, and a trace of hope rose in his eyes again. At least there's still one left. As long as we're more careful from here on, the interrogation should be able to continue. But at that very moment, the hope on Kafka's face froze solid, replaced by sheer shock. The eye of Curse that had never once come into contact with Edward or Cyrilla had somehow turned blue as well. Kafka's heart sank instantly, and a terrifying possibility flashed through his mind. The only explanation was that when he cast a magic shield just now, he must have accidentally come into contact with Ronan and triggered a corruption in the Eye of Curse. Realizing that, Kafka immediately placed the remaining Eye of Curse into Ronan's hand. Lord Ronan, forgive my boldness, but before he could finish, the Eye of Curse exploded the moment it touched Ronan. Kafka stood there completely stunned. In all his years of using the Eye of Curse, this was the first time he had ever seen something like this. Then Kafka raised his head, his expression turning deadly serious. Lord Ronan, listen to me carefully. It looks like there's some kind of curse hidden inside your body. Have you ever felt restricted in some way? For example, something everyone else can do, but you alone can't? Ronan's heart gave a violent jolt. Could the reason he had never been able to sense magic all this time really be because of that? Seeing that Ronan didn't want to say more, Kafka chose not to press him. If you don't want anyone else to know, I won't breathe a word of it. Besides, this isn't something I can solve myself. But you must remember one thing. Judging by the intensity of this curse alone, the one who cast it must hate you with extraordinary bitterness. So from now on, you need to be extremely careful. Kafka paused for a moment before continuing. That said, you don't have to panic too much. As far as I know, Professor Secret, the legendary mage of Philion, is one of the greatest experts in curses on this continent. He may be able to help you. On the way back to Philion, Ronan felt an unbearable itch in his eyes. Combined with the crushing knowledge that a curse was hidden inside him, it only made him more restless and agitated. Nybyrager saw all of it clearly and finally couldn't hold back from comforting him. Itchy eyes are often one of the signs that a curse is beginning to weaken, so you don't need to worry too much. Then she shifted the topic. But do you really have no idea who might have put that curse on you? Ronan only shook his head, his voice full of confusion and disbelief. I've always thought I treated people kindly. I've never made some mortal enemy of anyone, so I can't understand who could possibly hate me this much. Nybyrager, however, clearly wasn't convinced. She silently turned her gaze toward the carriage window. Scenes from the last time Ronan stood up for Adeshan replaying again and again in her mind. Just then, Ronan suddenly spoke up and broke her train of thought. By the way, Master, thanks for stopping Kafka back there. If you hadn't been there, I doubt he would have let me off that easily. Nybarger let out a soft laugh. I was only doing what a teacher is supposed to do. There's nothing to thank me for. At those words, Ronin fell silent. His impression of Nybarger grew even deeper. This former sword saint wasn't just overwhelmingly skilled. Her character was beyond reproach as well. But the more he thought about it, another question quietly rose in his mind. In his previous life, he and the Grand General had fought in bloodshed until the very last moment. So why had he never once seen this powerful former sword saint? Early the next morning, Ronin hurried to Pillar Park, the training space reserved for the magic department. Ade-chan had already been waiting there for quite a while under Nybarger's instructions, and the moment she saw Ronin, a bright smile spread across her face. Ronin, it's been so long. If Professor Nybarger hadn't asked for it, I probably would have had to wait even longer to see you. Have you been doing well lately? The warm, open energy radiating from Ade-chan immediately left Ronin a little flustered. After all, he still hadn't figured out how he was supposed to face Ade-chan. Seeing how awkward he looked, Ade-chan didn't keep pressing and instead changed the subject on her own. I heard from Professor Nybarger that you want to remove the curse inside you. Ronin nodded lightly as he followed Ade-chan forward. I heard Professor Secret is an expert in this field, so I wanted to come and give it a try. As he spoke, he glanced around at the gloomy surroundings. He couldn't help muttering under his breath, I didn't expect a professor like that to live somewhere like this. He's probably got a seriously strange personality. Ade-chan laughed in agreement. That's true. Professor Secret's office is just as unusual. If you're not from the magic department, you can barely even find it. That's why I specifically asked a close friend from the magic department to guide us. The moment she finished speaking, a purple figure suddenly appeared right in front of them. In the next instant, the newcomer leaped into Ade-chan's arms like an overly clingy kitten. Sister Ade-chan, I missed you. This is a new spell I learned. Pretty amazing, right? Ade-chan couldn't help laughing. Sorry for calling you out so suddenly. Something urgent came up, and I wanted to ask you to help us find Professor Secret. At that, Alberbet immediately lifted his head and rubbed affectionately against the back of Ade-chan's hand, looking completely love-struck. His answer came without the slightest hesitation. It's fine, Sister Ade-chan. If it's something you want, I'd do anything. Seeing that scene, Ronin froze on the spot. This was the very same person who had once invited him to join House Akarugia, the arrogant one who always seemed to carry pride in every inch of his body. Just as Alberbet was about to keep clinging to Ade-chan and fussing over her, the corner of his eye suddenly caught sight of Ronin standing nearby. The moment Alberbet realized someone else was there, his expression darkened instantly, and his mind seemed to crash on the spot. Seeing that he had finally been noticed, Ronin had no choice but to speak first and break the awkward silence. Coming back to his senses, Alberbet sprang out of Ade-chan's arms at once. What are you doing here? And why are you with Sister Ade-chan? Though he looked 1,000 times unwilling, Alberbet still ended up leading Ronin to an old house. But as soon as Ronin felt the eerie atmosphere all around them, he couldn't help frowning. His tone carried both suspicion and amusement. Don't tell me you're planning to silence me here, just because I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Hearing that, Alberbet immediately bristled all over again. Shut your mouth and just follow me. Then Alberbet led Ronin into the house. But the only thing waiting inside was a sleeping old woman. Ronin couldn't help going speechless and instinctively looked toward Alberbet. Could this really be Professor Secret? Alberbet didn't answer his question. He simply strode toward the old woman. There's just one final step left. No matter what you see in a moment, don't be too surprised. As he spoke, Alberbet slowly raised an arm and began chanting an obscure, difficult magic spell. In the next instant, the motionless old woman suddenly snapped her eyes open, and her mouth rapidly swelled at a visible speed. A powerful suction force burst out from inside her mouth. By the time Ronin opened his eyes again, the two of them were already inside an office stacked from floor to ceiling with books. Ronin was completely stunned. He had never expected the entrance to this place to be designed in such a bizarre way. Just then, a child suddenly appeared in front of Ronin. So you're Miss Nybarger's new disciple? Just like she said, there's an extremely vicious curse hidden inside your body. Ronin stared at the child in disbelief. Don't tell me this guy is Professor Secret. Secret naturally saw right through his confusion. Don't be surprised. My actual age is already over 80, but we can talk about that later. Right now, the most important thing is removing the curse inside you. As he spoke, Secret lightly snapped his fingers. With a burst of dazzling light, a strange and intricate magic circle instantly unfolded beneath Ronin's feet, while countless half-transparent ancient symbols appeared and slowly revolved around his body. Secret stared at the circle, his brows tightening slightly, and both amazement and gravity entered his voice. I honestly didn't expect the curse inside you to be this complicated. Countless curses are tangled together, layered over one another, and every single one carries the eerie aura of an ancient sorcerer. Any cursed mage with even slightly less skill probably wouldn't know where to begin. Hearing that, Ronin's heart sank at once. Then can the curse inside me still be removed? Secret waved a hand. Don't worry. The variety and number of curses inside, you have definitely gone beyond what I expected. But I came prepared. I'm going to build an imaginary world inside your consciousness and project the curses within you into it. Your job is simple. Find a root curse that's binding you, then kill it. Only by severing the source can the curse be completely broken. Before Ronin could ask anything else, Secret's finger had already touched his forehead. In the very next second, Ronin felt his consciousness violently seized by an invisible force, and it plunged straight into a pitch-black abyss until he lost all awareness. When he opened his eyes again, the scene in front of him had already changed. The moment he saw the familiar house before him, his whole body went rigid. His mind turned hazy, and a chill ran through him. How could the root of the curse be here? Before Ronin could recover, a clear and cheerful child's laughter suddenly rang out. Then little Iller came running into a nearby house at full speed. "Mom, I'm back." Almost on instinct, Ronin followed her inside. Once he entered, he saw Iller leaning over a cradle, staring at the baby inside with shining eyes, her face full of joy and curiosity. Little brother is so cute. But why is little Ronin sleeping every day? Is he sick? As soon as she finished speaking, a woman whose features resembled Iller's by 7 or 8 parts slowly walked over. A warm smile rested on her face, because babies need plenty of sleep to grow up healthy. Of course, if little Ronin really is sick, then Iller, as his big sister, you have to take good care of him. At those words, Iller excitedly raised her tiny fist. Her voice was young, but her resolve was absolute. "No problem, Mom. I'll protect Ronin for the rest of my life." Ronin stood there, staring at the warm scene before him, so bright it almost hurt his eyes, and for a moment he completely forgot why he had come here. But just then, a harsh sound of a door being pushed open suddenly rang out. In the next instant, a bone-piercing chill and an eerie aura swept through the entire room. Every hair on Ronin's body stood on end as a powerful sense of dread surged inside him. He desperately tried to turn and look at the figure by the door, but his body felt as if it had been hit by a paralysis spell. He couldn't move at all. All he could do was watch helplessly as a blurred shadow slowly stepped inside. The moment she saw the newcomer, Iller ran toward them in delight. But the shadow violently shook off her hand and walked straight toward little Ronin in the cradle. Seeing that, the mother thought he was simply eager to see the baby, and her warm smile never faded. "The child is right there in the cradle. He really looks just like you." But in the very next instant, the shadow abruptly raised a hand toward the mother. His lips moved as if chanting something, yet Ronin couldn't hear a single word. Then the mother collapsed straight to the floor. That sight instantly left little Iller frozen in shock. Before she could even speak, the shadow turned that cold hand toward her as well and used the exact same method again, watching his mother and sister fall one after another. Ronin felt as if an invisible hand had clenched his heart in a death grip. Yet he could do nothing. He could only stand there and watch it all happen. After finishing that, the shadow stretched its claws toward little Ronin in the cradle as well. Countless curses surfaced in his hand and poured endlessly into Ronin's body. At that moment, Ronin finally understood that this shadow before him was the true root of the curse. Meanwhile, in the outside world, Secret's hands had already begun trembling uncontrollably as he maintained the spell. Even after preparing as thoroughly as I did, I still didn't expect my magic power to be drained dry so quickly. The intensity of this curse is far beyond anything I imagined. Alberbet had clearly never seen Professor Secret pushed into such a desperate corner before, and he couldn't help asking, "Even you are saying that? Then how many curses does he actually have on him?" Secret slowly raised his head, his expression more serious than ever. "If we ignore intensity and only count quantity, there are probably around 10 curses inside him. And the one I just burned through all my magic to remove was only a single layer of them." Just as Secret finished his preliminary assessment of Ronin's overall condition, Ronin, inside the world of consciousness, finally broke free of the restraints on his body after the shadow left. Ronin didn't chase after him right away. Instead, he rushed straight toward the 2 people lying on the ground. After checking them carefully, he found that they had only fallen into a deep sleep and weren't in any real danger. Only then did he finally let out a breath of relief. Then Ronin clenched his teeth and forcibly tried to calm the storm of emotions surging inside him. He knew better than anyone that the shadow was the true root of this curse. But even so, the murderous rage raging in his chest refused to settle down. In the next instant, his sword, La Mancha, appeared automatically at his side. A heartbeat later, the door was cut into pieces. Ronan shot outside at astonishing speed, trying to catch the shadow. But the moment he rushed out, he abruptly stopped in his tracks. The shadow hadn't gone anywhere. It was standing not far away, as if it had been waiting for Ronan to come after it. Ronan didn't hesitate for even a second. Gripping La Mancha again, he charged straight at the shadow. But to his surprise, the shadow merely lifted a hand calmly and gathered a mass of dark magic. In the next moment, that magic took the shape of a shadowy longsword in midair. With one casual swing, it effortlessly blocked Ronan's full-force strike. Ronan froze on the spot. He had never imagined that even a curse could wield a sword, and judging from that exchange alone, the shadow's mastery of swordsmanship far surpassed his own. In the instant Ronan hesitated, the shadow's figure turned into a streak of light and flashed past him. A second later, Ronan dropped to his knees with a heavy thud. Even La Mancha nearly slipped out of his hand. Yet the shadow merely cast him a cold glance before turning away to leave. Seeing that, Ronan forced himself back to his feet and roared in a hoarse but thunderous voice, "Why are you doing this? From the way my sister and my mother treated you, there's no doubt you're my father. But as my father, you attacked my sister and my mother, and you even cursed me with your own hands. Can you still call yourself a father after that?" The moment those words fell, violent red magic began surging wildly around Ronan. With nothing left in his eyes but resolve, he threw every last bit of strength he had into one final charge at the shadow. But this time, the shadow didn't move to block him. It merely closed its eyes slowly. Ronan swung without the slightest hesitation and severed the shadow's head. "If you want to talk, fine. I'll uncover the truth myself. Now, get the hell out of my body." As the shadow completely dispersed, Ronan's consciousness was violently dragged back into reality. He shook his head hard, trying to pull himself out of that unbearably tense state of battle. Just then, an old yet gentle voice suddenly sounded from behind him. "So you're finally awake, Ronan. How was the journey?" Ronan turned around, his face full of confusion. Standing there was an old man dressed exactly like Professor Secret. Realization suddenly struck Ronan, and he blurted out, "Don't tell me you're the real Professor Secret? Why did you suddenly return to an appearance that matches your age? Was it because you helped remove my curse?" Secret only let out a quiet chuckle. "That has nothing to do with you, so there's no need to worry. But Ronan, haven't you noticed that something about you is different now?" Only then did Ronan calm himself and properly examine his own condition. When he looked at the old man again, he was shocked to find immense, overwhelming magic spilling from Secret's body. "To be honest, the moment I first saw you, I could already tell you weren't ordinary. But now it looks like you're even more powerful than I imagined." Hearing that, Secret laughed with satisfaction. "Then it seems you can finally sense magic properly now, which means the curse was removed successfully." After that, Ronan told Secret everything he had experienced in the world of consciousness from beginning to end. Secret took out a notebook and carefully wrote down every detail. "From what you've described, the curse inside you manifested by using memories that even you yourself no longer remember as its vessel. And the one who placed the curse on you appears to have been your father. But as I recall, you once said that neither you nor your sister had any memory of your parents at all, as if all memories related to them had been erased from your minds." Ronan nodded. "I really couldn't see the shadow's face clearly, but from the way my sister and my mother treated him, he had to be my father. And more importantly, when he was hurting them, I could feel a strange but unbearably heavy sorrow coming from him." Secret took a sip of coffee and nodded thoughtfully. "If that's the case, then everything does make sense. Your father didn't just seal your ability to sense magic. He also tampered with your memories. And during that process, part of his own memories must have been transferred into you by accident. That kind of thing isn't unusual. Magic related to memory often causes side effects like this. That's why the world of consciousness naturally took shape based on his memories this time. As for why you were able to use magic briefly before cutting down the curse, it was probably because the awareness suppressed by the curse temporarily returned at that moment. And that, in turn, gave you back the ability to sense magic." Hearing that, Ronan lowered his gaze to his palm. Several strands of multicolored light were softly winding around his fingers. "So the light's spilling out around me now. That's magic?" Secret nodded. "For now, you can only see it. But if you want to use and control magic as skillfully as an ordinary person, you'll still need to remove 2 more curses. That process will be long, and it won't be easy. After all, every curse on you came from exceptionally powerful ancient sorcerers." With that, Secret closed his notebook. "So go back and rest for now. Once I'm ready, I'll let you know." Ronan had just started to rise when his whole body suddenly went stiff. At some point, the Secret in front of him had somehow changed back into the form of a child. Noticing Ronan's stare, Secret shrugged helplessly. "My body situation is somewhat similar to yours. It's complicated in its own way. But Ronan, there are a few things I need to tell you. I can tell your mind is in chaos right now, but I still hope you'll pull yourself together as soon as possible. Instead of letting yourself be chained down by the memories of the past, you'd be better off cherishing what's in front of you now and the future ahead." Hearing that, Ronan stood up and gave Professor Secret a deep bow. "I understand, Professor. Thank you. I truly mean that." At the same time, inside the Parukia mine, after learning that the rock giant had attacked the blacksmith shop, Duke Yujev, Shuripan's father, personally came to the scene. He looked up at the strange rock giant that had once severely wounded Ronan with a single blow, and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. "I didn't expect this rock giant to be even larger than I imagined." But more than surprise, what filled Yujev's mind was curiosity. He had never expected that such a powerful opponent would be held back alone by a first-year student. While Yujev was lost in thought, one of his subordinates quickly approached from behind and began reporting on Parukia's restoration progress. The man was Norton, Yujev's personal guard and also the commander of House Grancia's Night Order. "Reporting, Your Grace. The restoration of Parukia is proceeding smoothly. At this rate, normal operations should be restored in about another week. We've also followed your orders and committed everything to tracking down the mastermind behind this. Unfortunately, we still haven't found a single worthwhile lead. It's as though they vanished into thin air. However, through information from Philion Academy, I've already identified the student who stopped this disaster. Would you like to meet him?" At that, Yujev gave a slow nod. A trace of anticipation flickered in his eyes. "Then let's go meet this young hero from Philion." But the moment he finished speaking, the rock giant, previously dormant, suddenly lit up with crimson light in both eyes. Its massive body slowly rose again and shifted into an attacking stance. The scene was instantly caught by the vigilant Norton, who immediately said, "Forgive me, Your Grace, but could you please step back for a moment? Leave this to me and the Night Order." But Yujev raised a hand to stop him, his tone so calm it bordered on casual. "No need. We're short on time, aren't we?" The moment those words fell, a brilliant blue light burst from Yujev's eyes. He gripped his sword and drew power into it. In the next instant, a terrifying blue sword aura erupted outward. Even the emotionless rock giant seemed to falter for the briefest moment after sensing the overwhelming force contained in that strike. Then, under that single slash, its enormous body completely shattered into countless fragments of stone. After finishing that, Yujev slowly sheathed his sword. With the same calm expression, he turned around. "Let's go. Time to meet Philion's little hero." Meanwhile, Ronan had just returned to his dormitory and was getting ready to rest when he suddenly heard a rapid knock at the door. Looking at Norton standing there, Ronan asked in a sharp tone, "What do you want?" The instant he heard that, veins bulged on Norton's forehead, and his voice turned openly contemptuous. "Do you even know who you're speaking to? And you still dare act this arrogant?" Only then did Ronan take a serious look at the man in front of him. But the moment he did, his heart trembled. The magic inside Norton felt unusually sinister, and mixed into it was a bizarre aura that seemed strangely familiar to him. Just as the tension between them was about to explode, Yujev reached out and patted Norton on the shoulder, signaling him to step back. "That's enough, Norton. We came to his door without any prior notice. We were the rude ones to begin with." Then Yujev gave Ronan a slight bow. "I apologize for my guard's behavior just now. If you don't mind, could you spare a little time to talk with me?" Once Ronan realized that the man before him was the head of House Grancia, he immediately lowered his guard and invited the two of them into his room. After sitting down, Yujev placed an exquisite sword sheath in front of Ronan. Ronan looked puzzled. "It's only a sword sheath. Why would it require you to come here in person?" At that, Yujev took a calm sip of tea. "Master Dylan specifically instructed me again and again that this had to be delivered into your hands personally. I've never seen that old man take something so seriously. Besides, the bond between House Grancia and Parukia is like comrades who fought side by side for years. My own sword, Parud, was also forged by Master Dylan." As he spoke, Yujev took out an identity token engraved with the seal of the family head. "That's why I should be the one thanking you even more. You saved Parukia, and you also saved our family's industry rooted there." Ronan was instantly stunned. If the identity token Shuripan had once handed to his sister was enough to buy a small city, then the one in Duke Yujev's hand could probably buy 3. Yujev took another light sip of tea. "Maria and Asher, who fought alongside you, should have received gifts by now as well. I only wonder whether they liked them." Hearing that, Ronan felt a bit awkward and quickly assured the Duke that there was no need to worry. He could already picture the two of them looking overwhelmingly grateful the moment they received those gifts. After a short stretch of polite conversation, Yujev suddenly set his teacup down and his tones sank a little. "Now, then, let's talk about something else. How much do you know about the masterminds behind this incident? Would you mind telling me?" Before his words had even fully settled, a terrifying wave of magic pressure erupted from Yujev's body. I'm very interested in these shameless cowards hiding in the shadows. Feeling that crushing aura, Ronin was deeply shaken. So this was the true strength of House Grancia's lord? After forcing himself to calm down, Ronin slowly opened his mouth. I don't know how much you already understand, but those rats are even crazier than you imagine. The moment those words fell, the veins on Norton's face began twitching violently. Ronin immediately sensed that something was off. This man named Norton had barely moved at all since entering the room. And yet just now, the moment Ronin mentioned those rats, a strange aura began leaking uncontrollably from his body. That aura was exactly the same as the one Edward and Cyrilla had given off before, equally revolting. When Ronin suddenly went silent, Duke Yujev asked in confusion, "Ronin, why did you stop? Are you feeling unwell?" Hearing that, Ronin's heart shuddered violently, and disbelief filled his mind. Yujev was one of the greatest powerhouses on the entire continent, yet he seemed completely unable to sense even the slightest abnormality. Could it be that he was the only one who could see it? To test the guess forming in his mind, Ronin continued, "Your Grace, have you ever heard of Krakio, the organization that worships the star giant?" The moment those words left Ronin's mouth, a savage light exploded in Norton's eyes, and that bizarre aura around him suddenly thickened several-fold. Yet Yujev still noticed nothing. He only asked calmly, "Did you uncover all of this yourself? I never imagined there was an organization like that hidden inside the Empire." Seeing that, Ronin curled his lips into a faintly mocking smile. "I pried out the two members I caught. It didn't even take much. I only had to lop off their limbs, and they spilled everything right away. Those idiots even started crying and begging me to spare their lives. It was pathetic. Would your Grace like me to go into more detail?" At that, Yujev hurriedly waved a hand. "That really won't be necessary. I'll confirm the rest through the official documents from Ritual in Prison. I'd rather not lose my appetite before dinner." Ronin didn't say another word, but by then he already had his answer. Ever since just now, Norton had clearly been on the verge of losing control of the aura leaking off him. After that round of probing, Ronin was fully certain something was wrong with Norton. And now that the fish had taken the bait, he escorted the Duke out while speaking in a respectful tone. "Your Grace, you can go ahead and deal with your other affairs. Tomorrow, I'll write down everything I know and send it to you, especially the part about Ayut." Ronin deliberately stressed that last sentence, while his gaze brushed over Norton in passing. It was obvious he was saying it for Norton's benefit. Night fell quickly. At that hour, Ronin was lying in bed, seemingly fast asleep. A shadow slipped into his room like a ghost. In the next instant, a vicious gleam flashed through Norton's eyes, and without the slightest hesitation, he swung his sword straight at Ronin's bed. But just as the blade was about to hit, the figure on the bed vanished into thin air. Then Ronin's voice drifted down from the ceiling. There was even a trace of amusement in it. "I knew you'd come tonight. Nice to finally meet you, the third rat of Krakio." Norton's face twisted with disbelief. He spun around and raised his hand to strike again. But Ronin merely pointed lazily to one side. "Why don't you look over there first? I went out of my way to invite a very special guest for you." Norton followed the direction Ronin pointed, and his whole body froze. Shuri Pan was sitting in a chair not far away, his eyes blazing with fury as he glared at Norton. "Norton, you'd better have a damn good explanation for this." But Norton showed no sign of wanting to explain himself at all. Instead, he slammed 1 foot hard into the ground, and in an instant, several pitch-black chains spread out from around his body and lashed in every direction. Ronin immediately felt his body turn unbearably heavy, and his brows furrowed at once as alarm rose in his mind. So this was the pressure of Norton's aura? Before Ronin could think any further, Norton had already rushed at Shuri Pan with sword in hand. There was even a layer of false regret in his voice. "What a shame, young master. I really didn't want things between us to end like this. But it's all Ronin's fault. He ruined everything. Still, lucky for me, you're not skilled enough at controlling your aura yet. And with that soft-hearted nature of yours, I doubt you'd dare use that wild sword style if innocent people might get caught in it. Would you?" Shuri Pan ground his teeth so hard his jaw nearly cracked. Even the hand gripping his sword trembled slightly. "Your strength is nothing like what I knew. Have you been hiding your true power this whole time? I always believed my family treated you well. So when exactly did you betray me?" Norton answered with a scornful sneer. With a light twist of his wrist, he effortlessly redirected Shuri Pan's block. His voice was cold and absolute. "From the very beginning, I was never a servant of House Grancia." The instant those words fell, he gathered all of his magic, clearly intending to kill Shuri Pan in a single strike. Shuri Pan's face turned colder than ever, but his voice became eerily calm. "That's all I needed to confirm. Ronin, do whatever you want now." Before his words had even finished, Ronin's figure flashed into existence, and intercepted Norton's lethal blow with his sword. Then Ronan glanced back at Shuripan over his shoulder, sounding helplessly annoyed. "You really are an idiot. You dragged this out just to hear him say that much himself?" Norton, meanwhile, stared in stunned disbelief at the suddenly reappearing Ronan. He clearly hadn't expected Ronan to get there that fast. In the instant Norton faltered, Shuripan seized the opening and brought his sword crashing down, a fierce wave of sword aura cutting straight toward him. Only then did Norton snap back to his senses and throw himself backward, barely escaping the strike. He had never imagined that under the suppression of his aura, both of them could still unleash sword attacks this strong. Realizing that dragging this out any longer would leave him with no chance of winning, Norton gritted his teeth and turned to flee. The violent clash had already caused enough commotion to draw the professors of Philion Academy. Once they arrived, there would be no escape left for him. But before Norton could get more than a few steps away, Shuripan's figure was already above his head. His voice was filled with icy fury. "You're right, Norton. I still can't control the family's secret sword art as perfectly as my father can. But knowing that, you still dared to run into a place like this. There are no innocent bystanders here. Only you, you damned traitor." The instant those words fell, Shuripan's aura exploded. Countless sharp sword energies gathered into a massive tornado, which roared straight toward Norton. This was House Grancia's secret sword technique, Storm Sword. Norton's expression changed drastically, and he immediately raised his blade to defend himself. But the power of Storm Sword far exceeded anything he had expected. The sword aura shattered his defense in an instant and swallowed him whole. By the time the storm dispersed, every meridian in Norton's body had been severed by sword energy, leaving him with only the faintest thread of life. Then Ronan walked over with his arms folded, a faintly amused smile hanging on his lips. "You left him alive in the end, but I'm not sure this guy can last long enough to make it to Ruchelin." Shuripan's expression, however, remained grim. There was no trace of relief on his face. "I never imagined there'd be a traitor hidden inside my family for 4 whole years. I need to send this news back to House Grancia immediately. I'm leaving this place to you for now." With that, he said nothing more and turned to race toward House Grancia's domain. Ronan watched his back disappear into the distance and muttered a few curses under his breath. But before he could finish, a faint light suddenly shimmered behind him, and a portal appeared out of nowhere. The next moment, Nybyrager and the headmaster stepped out of it, urgently asking Ronan what had happened. Ronan turned toward them and froze on the spot. Nybyrager was actually wearing pajamas covered in cute little snake patterns, making her look completely different from usual. But seeing the restrained anger on her face, Ronan didn't dare joke around too much. He quickly gave a thumbs up and forced out a few exaggerated compliments instead. Still, just to be safe, Ronan immediately sobered up and seriously told the two of them to repeat after him. "Ayut is a lunatic." Nybyrager and the headmaster looked utterly baffled, but they still repeated it anyway. Only then did Ronan finally relax and tell them everything that had just happened, from start to finish. When the headmaster heard it all, his expression became gravely serious. "I never expected even a great noble house like Grancia to have already been infiltrated by Krakio traitor. This is even worse than I imagined. Thanks to you, Ronan, the Empire narrowly avoided a catastrophe." Being praised to his face by the headmaster made Ronan scratch his head awkwardly. Although he told him most of what had happened without hiding anything, he deliberately kept secret the fact that he could see the strange magic inside Norton. He understood very well that if that secret came to light, not only he, but everyone around him could become Krakio's next target. This matter will soon trigger a large-scale investigation across the Empire, with House Grancia at the center of it, so you don't need to worry too much. That said, ever since the Perukia blacksmith shop incident, the Empire has owed you one. As the headmaster of Philion Academy, I should reward you properly. Ronan, is there something you want? The moment he heard that, Ronan's spirits lifted instantly, and a spark lit up in his eyes, because he had already been planning something for quite a while. So early the next morning, Ronan posted a recruitment notice on the Academy bulletin board. The ultimate goal of creating this club was to start building up manpower in advance, so he could face the giant commanders of the future. As the first club in the Academy's history to be allowed to go out on field training, the notice immediately drew a huge crowd of students the moment it went up. But to everyone's surprise, after 2.5 full days, Ronan's club still hadn't recruited a single person besides Bram, who had already agreed to join beforehand. The reason was simple. Anyone who wanted to join had to survive several rounds under Ronan's hand first, and also sign a life-and-death waiver on the spot. As a result, the entire Academy now believed that 10 lives still wouldn't be enough to survive Ronan's club. Looking at the empty recruitment booth, Ronan could only sigh helplessly, just as he was about to pack up and call the whole thing off. A soft female voice suddenly drifted over from the side. Ronan looked up at once. In the corner of the recruitment area, there was suddenly a figure in a winter cloak and hood where no one had been before. The fact that he hadn't sensed her presence at all instantly made Ronan wary. Still, he kept that hidden behind a bright smile and asked whether she was there to join the club. At his question, the newcomer slowly raised a hand and pulled back her hood, revealing a pale and delicate face. But her gaze didn't fall on Ronan at all. Instead, it locked directly onto Sita beside him. In a soft voice, she asked, "If I join the club, can I pet it?" Ronan immediately broke into a grin and answered without hesitation, "Of course. Sita's always by my side. If you join, you can pet it as long as you want." At that, the girl's cheeks instantly flushed red, and her fondness for Sita showed openly in her eyes. Then Ronan pointed toward the Magitech training dummy beside them. "I haven't even asked your name yet. As for the entrance test, it's simple. Just use one of your moves on that Magitech dummy." Hearing that, the girl immediately raised her hand without hesitation. In the next instant, magic rapidly gathered around her body. I'm Ophelia, a third-year student from the magic department. Adeshan, who had been helping nearby, instantly covered her mouth in shock, because the spell Ophelia was using was dark element magic. And among all forms of magic, dark magic was one of the hardest to control. Yet Ophelia handled it with near-perfect precision. But what Ronan noticed was an even subtler detail. He could clearly see that mixed into the dark magic in Ophelia's palm was a faint but extremely pure trace of blood magic. At that moment, Ophelia gently brought her arm down. A massive claw of magic formed instantly, tearing through the air with fierce force as it shot toward the Magitech dummy. With a thunderous crash, 3 deep gashes were carved into the body of the Magitech dummy. Just as Ronan was about to say something after sensing how powerful Ophelia was, her voice suddenly spoke directly inside his mind. "So you really did notice? Then please keep this secret from me. Let's talk somewhere else. I have a few things I want to ask you too." Ronan immediately understood and gave a small nod. Soon, he followed Ophelia to a quiet corner just outside the Academy Square. The moment they arrived, Ophelia eagerly scooped Sita into her arms, her face glowing with unconcealed delight. "I can't believe this little one can actually absorb the surrounding magic. A fantasy species really is amazing." After hearing that, Ronan shifted the tone slightly and probed her with calm curiosity. "In my eyes, you're pretty amazing too. Last I checked, vampires left the Empire a long time ago." But Ophelia didn't hide anything. As she gently stroked Sita's fur, she slowly explained, "Not all vampires left. A very small number of our people stayed behind in different corners of the Empire. It's just that everyone's afraid of drawing trouble, so we've kept ourselves hidden and stayed out of sight." Hearing that, Ronan immediately pressed further. "Then why take the risk of being exposed just to join our club? Was it really only because of Sita?" Ophelia met his gaze with complete sincerity and nodded. "That's right. The first time I saw Sita in the square, I could feel the blood magic unique to our race coming from him." At that, understanding suddenly dawned on Ronan. No wonder Sita had been able to absorb energy through blood from the moment he was born. The power inside him was actually a vampire ability. But when Ophelia heard that, she froze in disbelief. Training blood magic normally takes at least 3 to 5 years, but he mastered it right after birth, and he already carries such dense blood energy. Once she said that aloud, the curiosity in her eyes when she looked at Sita only deepened. Then Ophelia slowly raised her head. Looking at Ronan with pitifully earnest eyes, she asked, "I originally joined just because I wanted to stay close to this little one. But now, can I ask for one more thing? Could Sita help me with research on a regular basis? If you agree, I promise I'll actively take part in club activities." Ronan looked into her honest eyes, knew she had no intention of harming Sita, and finally nodded. The next day, Ronan took the club members to the Badian Mountains for field training. This mountain range lay in an unexplored region of the Empire, which made it extremely dangerous. And the moment they arrived at the entrance, the pure magic saturating the air was enough to make Maria click her tongue in amazement. Ronan, meanwhile, lowered his gaze and looked down the mountain with a grave expression. At the foot of the slope, there was actually a village built by beastmen. Bram stared in disbelief. Beastmen build a place like that? Ronan didn't deny it. Instead, he explained in a serious tone, "In unstable border regions like this, it's common to find traces of beastmen. Right now, they're still only at the scale of a village. But beastmen reproduce incredibly fast. Before long, their numbers will spread across the entire mountain range. When that happens, the surrounding towns will take a heavy blow." As he said that, Ronan turned to the people behind him. "And our first task on this training expedition is to wipe out this beastman village before they have the chance to spread." Asher was stunned the moment he heard that. "But there have to be at least several hundred of them down there. Can just a few of us really handle that?" Ronan glanced down at the village again. "Relax. Ordinary beastmen, like those, aren't all that strong. As long as we don't run into the dominant species in this area, the ogres, you'll all be able to handle them just fine. But just as Ronan's group finished preparing and was about to move out, a gentle voice suddenly drifted from behind them. Your intentions are good, but I wouldn't recommend doing it this way. This isn't the right time yet. The instant he heard that voice, Ronan's entire body tensed. He hadn't sensed this elf's presence at all, which meant the other party's strength was anything but ordinary. Seeing how tense Ronan was, the elf in front of him slowly revealed a gentle smile. There's no need to be so nervous. I'm just a priest living in these mountains, serving the divine soul known as Senil. I mean you no harm. Before we talk properly, though, let's move somewhere else first. But even after hearing that, Ronan didn't lower his guard in the slightest. Without hesitation, he pressed La Mancha against the elf's throat. Sorry, but I've run into too many people with bad intentions lately to trust anyone easily. So do me a favor and repeat after me. Ayut is a worthless bastard. Shalantai looked completely at a loss, but in the end, he could only awkwardly repeat the phrase exactly as Ronan said it. After saying it, he even lowered his head in embarrassment. As a priest who serves the gods, this is the first time in over 1,000 years of solitary life that I've ever said something so vulgar. It's truly shameful. Ronan and the others were stunned on the spot. In other words, this elf before them had already existed long before the Empire was ever founded. Ronan's whole group, who had been ready to move at any moment, was completely shaken by what Shalantai had just revealed. But then Ronan quickly remembered the words Shalantai had said earlier. He immediately asked, "You just said you don't recommend that we eliminate those beastmen right now. Why exactly?" Hearing that, Shalantai's expression gradually turned serious. The behavior of these beastmen has been very strange lately. They are not nocturnal creatures, and yet every night they move through the mountains without fail. Even the ogres, who rarely leave their own territory, have begun appearing near the outer edge of the mountain range. All signs point to something major about to happen. As he spoke, Shalantai lightly raised a hand and pointed ahead. In an instant, the environment around them twisted violently. When they opened their eyes again, a vast and ancient palace stood before them. Asher stared in total disbelief at the sight, because a barrier spell on this scale was beyond even most of the professors in Filian's magic department. Before long, Shalantai led them to a strange, massive stone. There are plenty of empty rooms inside the temple. You may rest wherever you like. But Ronan had no intention of resting at all. He stepped forward at once and asked urgently, "Mr. Shalantai, do you know where the Eye of Curse lies?" Shalantai gave him a thoughtful look. "Is this because of the curse inside you? No wonder I've been feeling a dangerous aura hidden within you all this time. We should speak alone." So Ronan followed Shalantai to a quiet little courtyard. While examining him, Shalantai spoke softly. "Ronan, you're not just an ordinary student, are you?" Ronan could only answer awkwardly. But even then, his hand unconsciously tightened around La Mancha at his side. Shalantai seemed not to notice. He simply pushed a freshly brewed cup of tea toward him. "Your mind is too unsettled right now. Have some tea first. It'll help you." Ronan accepted the cup, but inwardly he stayed on guard, wondering whether something had been mixed into it. And then, just as he hesitated, a clear, refreshing fragrance drifted up from the tea. Ronan's whole body suddenly froze. Dense patterns of magical veins appeared before his eyes, clearer than they had ever been before, as if he had suddenly been given a completely new pair of eyes. Seeing that reaction, Shalantai didn't look surprised in the least. He explained calmly, "This is a spiritual herb so rare that even within the magic ley veins, it's almost impossible to find. It can force open suppressed meridians. Still, this tea normally wouldn't show such an extreme effect after only one cup. The reason you're reacting so strongly is most likely because of the curse inside you. I'll prepare more of this herb for you. If you keep drinking it, the effects should improve further." At that point, Shalantai suddenly paused. His tone also turned more serious. "So from now on, don't keep trying to use the Eye of Curse to forcefully remove your curse. When the Eye of Curse erases a curse, it also takes the user's life force in the process. Using it once or twice may not cause much trouble, but if you start relying on it too much, it will eventually cost you your life. Don't tell me you didn't know that." Hearing that, Ronan was stunned. He truly hadn't known the Eye of Curse came with such a side effect. Seeing that Ronan had no words for a moment, Shalantai continued gently, "I understand how you feel, Ronan, but the more anxious you are, the more necessary it becomes to slow down. Otherwise, one wrong step may lead to consequences you can never undo." Ronan silently nodded and at last loosened the grip he had been keeping on La Mancha. Professor Secret had said something similar too, that the curse inside him would have to be dealt with over time. Maybe he really had been too impatient lately. Looking at the ever-calm and gentle Shalantai, Ronan couldn't help feeling a strange sense of familiarity. and yet he was certain that in his previous life, he had never met this person. At that thought, Ronan finally stopped hiding things. He picked up the tea and said quietly, "Thank you for the warning. I really have been too impatient lately, because recently, I've encountered far too many fanatics chasing the stars." With that, Ronan raised the cup, ready to drink it in one go. But he never noticed that Shalantai's face had already darkened. Before long, night had fully fallen. Shalantai stood alone before that strange stone, his expression filled with complicated emotions. Those fanatics Ronan mentioned, they must be that group. So this time, am I supposed to stand by and do nothing again? Or is Ronan the answer you're giving me? Just as Shalantai sank into thought, Ronan's voice suddenly rose from behind him. Does that stone have some special meaning? The moment the subject came up, a strange light flared in Shalantai's eyes. It is the divine statue of the god I serve, Senal. Every 1,000 years, our order sends 1,000 physical embodiments like this one to Dakni, the holy land of the empire. The place is battered by wind and rain all year long, so most stones can't survive even 200 years before weathering away. But every now and then, a very rare few manage to endure for a full 1,000 years, proving a will that transcends time itself. And the truly sacred image of Lord Senal lies in the proud soul that has settled within one of those stones. At that point, the corners of Shalantai's lips lifted on their own, forming a gentle smile. Even now, I still remember the day my brothers and I carried this divine statue back together. It's just a shame that, now, I'm the only one left still holding on to this faith. After all, devoting an entire lifetime to a god who never responds, no matter how long you wait, is an incredibly difficult thing. Of course, there were times when even I wavered. I thought about abandoning the faith and living only for myself. But whenever that happened, I would always get the same strange feeling, a sense that I needed to stay. And that feeling was this, that one day, Lord Senal's will inside this divine statue would become the stepping stone that saves the world. After saying that, Shalantai patted Ronan on the shoulder with visible delight, and I feel that moment is very close now. The next day, every member of Ronan's team was drinking the herbal tea Shalantai had given them, combined with the unbelievably dense magic in the air around the place. Everyone's affinity for magic rose noticeably. Meanwhile, Ronan followed Shalantai up the mountain to gather herbs and search for information. After several days passed like that, Ronan decided to say goodbye to Shalantai, clear out the Beastman village below the mountain, and then return to the academy to prepare for the next training expedition. But Shalantai still looked deeply uneasy. Even now, I still haven't figured out why those monsters are behaving so strangely. For safety's sake, I think you should wait a little longer. Hearing that, Ronan smiled and shook his head. Shalantai, please trust us. Besides, didn't you say so yourself? Those creatures are only acting strangely. Their strength hasn't increased, right? The others behind him quickly chimed in, insisting that they would all be careful. Seeing how firm they were, Ronan scratched his head and added, more importantly, our field training deadline is almost up. We need to get back to the academy and let everyone know we're safe. Unable to argue against their insistence any longer, Shalantai finally nodded and raised a hand, casting a spell over them. With this magic on you, you'll be able to enter and leave the temple freely without the barrier blocking you. If anything dangerous happens, come back immediately. Before long, Ronan led everyone to the area near the Beastman village. But what they found there was the Beastmen sitting together, smugly splitting up plundered treasures. Clear proof that nearby towns had already suffered at their hands. The moment Ronan saw that scene, he immediately lowered his voice and ordered everyone to prepare for battle. Right after that, Asher used telekinetic magic, setting Maria and Bram down onto the ground. A few beastmen who noticed the disturbance instantly let out furious roars and charged at the two of them. Maria and Bram entered combat at once, their figures turning into streaks of light. As they plunged straight into the beastmen and began slaughtering them, Asher floated overhead, continuously controlling boulders and smashing them down onto the beastmen below. Under the nearly flawless coordination of the three of them, the entire Beastman village was wiped out in no time. Looking at the horrific scene spread across the ground, Asher's eyes immediately turned red, and he couldn't help worrying that killing like this would surely bring retribution one day. Just as Ronan was quietly comforting Asher while also wondering whether to raise the difficulty of the next mission, Sita suddenly tapped him lightly with a little paw. It was clearly telling him to look to the side. Following where Sita indicated, the group turned and saw that under a large tree not far away, someone was tied up. All of them were instantly shocked, because the person bound there was a badly wounded elf. Ronan hurried over to untie her, while also having Sita use healing magic to treat her injuries. After a while, the elf slowly opened her eyes. But the moment she sensed the magic around the group, a look of pure shock immediately spread across his face. Before she could say anything, she suddenly clutched her chest and coughed up a mouthful of blood. Then she grabbed Ronan's shoulder with desperate force, her voice frantic. "I can sense Lord Shalantai's magic from all of you. Does that mean you came out of the temple? Please, take me to Lord Shalantai right now. Those madmen are coming. If we lose any more time, Lord Shalantai's life will be in danger." Before Ronan could ask another question, the elf's body went limp and she collapsed unconscious on the spot. Ronan didn't have time to think it through. He immediately picked the elf up and rushed back to the temple. Even Shalantai was startled by the commotion. "Ronan, why are you back so soon? Did something happen?" Ronan immediately answered, "We rescued this prisoner from the Beastman village just now. She insisted that she absolutely had to see you, so I brought her here first." Hearing that, Shalantai looked curiously at the elf on Ronan's back. But the instant he saw the woman's face clearly, he froze on the spot, and his expression darkened on its own. After settling the elf down properly, Shalantai finally managed a faint smile and thanked Ronan. "This time, I truly owe you one, Ronan. If not for you, I might have lost a precious member of my family." She is one of the very few believers in this world who still keep faith in Lord Senal. Once upon a time, she was more devout than anyone. Hearing that, Ronan scratched his head awkwardly. Then who exactly are those madmen she was so desperately warning me about? Are they really a threat to your life? After hearing that, Shalantai's expression grew visibly more forlorn. To be honest, I don't understand them all that well either. They're a religious group that worships some unknown existence as a god. Long ago, they hid their identities and caused chaos all across the continent. Even I can't be sure how long this organization has truly existed. All I know is that they call themselves the Krakio Church. Over the years, plenty of their people have come looking for me. But for the past few hundred years, there was no sign of them at all. I thought they'd given up trying to find me. I never expected them to start moving again now. Seeing how calm Shalantai still sounded, Ronan was the one who became anxious instead. "If those lunatics are after you, then come with me and hide in the imperial capital." But Shalantai shook his head at once, rejecting the idea without the slightest hesitation. "No, I can't abandon the temple. This place carries the soul of Lord Senal. And even if I fled somewhere else, I'd only end up dragging disaster onto innocent people. That's not a future I can accept." After saying that, he looked at Ronan with complete sincerity. "So please, leave with your companions as soon as possible. I don't want to drag you all into this danger too. I'm asking you. Promise me." Seeing how resolute he was, Ronan stopped trying to persuade him and instead decided to return to the imperial capital to bring back reinforcements. "I know an incredibly strong older sister. I'll go bring her here right away. Until I get back, Shalantai, hide well and don't do anything reckless." Ronan's overly tense attitude actually made Shalantai laugh softly. Then, speaking in a heartfelt tone, he placed a ring into Ronan's hand. "Take this as thanks for saving Brigia. If one day you go to the Dawn Magic Tower, give this to Susu there. You'll definitely find information there related to the curse inside you." After that, Shalantai sincerely thanked Ronan once more. "Thank you. Truly, the few days I spent with you felt like a gift heaven gave me." Ronan scratched his head awkwardly. "It's not like we'll never see each other again. Why say something so sentimental? I'll be back soon, so make sure you stay safe." The moment he finished speaking, Ronan's figure vanished from the spot. But at the exact instant he disappeared, the smile on Shalantai's face vanished too, replaced by a cold and solemn expression. Then Shalantai slowly turned to look inside the room, his voice perfectly calm. "As someone who was once family, now that we've reunited after so long, shouldn't I be happy to see you? Or perhaps I should call you by your proper title. The church's assassin, Brigia." The moment those words fell, Brigia, who had been lying there heavily wounded and unconscious, instantly recovered as if nothing had happened. As light distorted around her, her former elven appearance began to shift. A sick, crazed smile spread across her face. "It's been a long time, Shalantai. You've changed. To think you'd actually pretend to heal me while slipping me a paralytic poison." Shalantai's expression remained cold. "You of all people, the shadow of Lemahame, put on that pitiful act of being captured by beastmen. Compared to you, I'm perfectly normal." Brigia only gave a contemptuous shrug in response. "I couldn't help it. Meeting you in person is just too difficult. No matter how many magical beasts I manipulated to lure you out, you never took the bait." At that point, a mocking smile suddenly spread across Brigia's face. "But a few days ago, I happened to notice that those amusing little kids were all covered in your aura. Originally, I was planning to tear them to pieces first and use that to lure you out. But seeing as we were once fellow believers, I already showed tremendous restraint. Shouldn't you be thanking me?"